Okay, folks, welcome back. Thanks, everybody, for that short recess, and we're ready to get moving. Our next item on the agenda, we're moving on to unfinished business, and our first item is item C1. This is the review and discussion of Harbor Advisory Board and Harbor Advisory Board Marine Facilities recommendations on a proposed boatyard marine services facility here in Moore Bay. I'll turn this over to Mr. Endersby, and he'll present us with this wonderful staff report.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor Irons and Council. I wish I had a slick PowerPoint, but I'm not quite up to that speed yet, and I'd probably get a neck injury trying to go back and forth all the time anyhow. But I would like to present this and bring back a little bit of history and some thank yous to the Harbor Advisory Board and Ad Hoc Committee that have done a tremendous amount of work on this project. In particular, Ron Reisner, Dana McClish, Alan Allward from the Harbor Advisory Board, and Adrian Harris, and Mike Multari filling in for Adrian at the NEP. They've done a ton of work on this project for the last couple of years here, and I'd like to commend them for the great work and their commitment. It's been no small feat. I'm going to bring up the recommendation here real quickly, and just kind of, I want you to keep that in mind as we move forward, and then I'll try to move through the staff report as diligently and quickly as I can. There's a lot of moving parts to this. There's a lot of history to it. What we're basically recommending here is consider the Harbor Advisory Board's recommendations and input, and their input's obviously fed by the Ad Hoc Committee that did the heavy lifting. But we're also asking the City Council to recommend authorizing the Harbor Director, that'd be me, to engage a professional, some kind of design professional to develop some scaled concept drawings of the triangle lot to see, we have competing interest in there, and to see what's really going to fit in there. Boatyard, Maritime Museum, parking, combination of the three, and really see what'll fit before we commit too much more time, energy, and money moving forward on the boatyard, just because if one or the other won't fit, we've got some hard decisions to make to decide which ones we want to fit. So keep those in mind. That's the kind of underlying background of this whole thing. So as you know, the boatyard, there's a lot of history to it. When I started here in the early 90s, I think we had boatyard activity going on with Jim Wood, an old Marine Surveyor that used to live here, since passed on. Jim Phillips, I see him out here in the audience from the Harbor Advisory Board, and they worked on that decades ago. Made a fair amount of good progress in the past. A lot of good studies were done. A lot of work was done at the northern end of the waterfront, basically from the power plant intake building northward was where all that was concentrated. Work ebbed and flowed. Different work products came out of it. Eventually kind of came to a halt for various reasons that we don't really need to go into here, but renewed interest in this boatyard and energy with the current Harbor Advisory Board over the last 3 to 4 years, and bringing this back, and we've actually got it on as a council goal. I can't quote chapter and verse on which goal it is, but we do have as a council goal to continue pursuing this boatyard because it's seen as an important element in this community's future. So back into the history, at the April 22nd, 2015 special Harbor Advisory Board meeting, the Harbor Advisory Board received Lisa Wise Consulting, LWC's Boatyard Haul-Out Market Demand Analysis. It's in your staff report. I won't belabor all the elements of that. Essentially what that market demand analysis primary recommendation was, and it was aimed to inform all us decision makers and community leaders in our efforts to possibly establish this new boatyard, is to proceed on with next steps of the investigation based on strong local support and a potential customer base of roughly 270 vessels and a gross revenue somewhere between 1 and 2 million. And a rough scale of magnitude. So I kind of view that Lisa Wise Consulting document as sort of a go, no-go test, or a, should we continue on or not? And it does indicate, at least from a pure market demand analysis standpoint, there is a market out there, local and to a certain lesser degree outside boaters. But we do have a demand for a boatyard here, and how that plays into feasibility. Will this boatyard be in the black? Will it be in the red? We really don't know until you have a location, and then the location and how much to build and acquire the land and all those other moving parts. So proceeding forward here in small steps, we see the next step, as I stated in the recommendations, is sort of see what will fit in that triangle lot to see if it's feasible for this yard to move forward. At the April 22nd Harbor Advisory Board meeting, the Harbor Advisory Board had a committee report, and the committee, ad hoc committee, reported that they supported the concept of the boatyard investigation process, continuing to move forward. They recommended the lessons learned from the market analysis proceed in the market demand analysis process and document be used to inform the future work effort. In other words, we've got the Lisa Wise consulting document. Let's continue to use that to inform the process and moving on into feasibility and siting and all the other things we need. And then thirdly, and probably most importantly, for the ad hoc committee to develop site criteria for the future boatyard analysis and study work, meaning what is the size, shape, color, flavor, everything needed and what we think we have in a market here. What's it going to take to serve that market? And that is what the site criteria are. The Harbor Advisory Board voted unanimously at that meeting that the committee, ad hoc committee, should proceed as rapidly as possible with developing that site committee. They did, again, commend that committee for all the hard work they did. They did a lot of research, a lot of outreach to other boatyards, did a lot of legwork on their own dime. And we thank them for that. And they did come back at the May 7th Harbor Advisory Board meeting and presented the site criteria document for consideration and endorsement. The Harbor Advisory Board, and this is all attached to your staff report, the Harbor Advisory Board voted unanimously to accept the committee's criteria, the design criteria, and recommend the City Council in the very near future apply the site criteria to identifying and committing planning activities to a Morro Bay Boatyard site, the most likely of which is the city's recently acquired quote-unquote triangle lot property at the power plant's southwest corner. Not technically a triangle, but we're calling it a triangle because that's the closest shape we can come up with. It's easy to say. So with that, next steps we see are, again, at the June 4th Harbor Advisory Board meeting, the Harbor Advisory Board, the committee provided the Harbor Advisory Board with another summary document of its most recent activities. Those activities were recommending continuing to monitor the city's intentions for the triangle lot and pressing the city to make a conscientious decision to commit siting commitment to that triangle lot space, authorizing the committee to work directly with the city manager and the city council regarding utilization of the triangle lot, keep into consideration power plant property inside the main plant entry gate if it became feasible or possible to use as an alternative site, meaning north of our office and north of the Coast Guard building, north of the power plant intake building. That in the past was the primary site for the haul-out location, and then it went up, the haul-out facility itself went up the dirt road. What the advisory ad hoc committee was advising here, or recommending here was, while we're concentrating on the triangle lot, don't give up on some other possibilities if they come forward in a timely manner. Will they? Anybody's guess. As you know, we tried to negotiate with Dynegy for some property acquisition in lieu of paying that last community development fund that didn't go anywhere. We didn't get any property out of that. They're actively trying to sell it. I don't suspect they're ready to just give up any property at this point, but it's certainly something we should keep an eye on if it does become a possibility. And then finally, obtain from the city definitive information regarding the possibility of available Dynegy outbuilding near the triangle lot's northeast corner, currently slated for demolition. That's what's commonly called the switch building. It's on the Dynegy's kind of southern border facing the triangle lot. There's two fairly large metal buildings out there, prefabricated metal buildings. Dynegy is in the process of applying for and getting permits to demolish all of their outbuildings all around the main plant property, those two included. They are certainly willing. I met with Nina Hartley from the power plant a couple of weeks ago, and Dynegy is certainly willing to entertain any sort of ideas and options they may have rather than just hire a contractor to come and destroy them if there's any kind of beneficial reuse. They did indicate they have some private parties interested in as well, because they're in pretty good shape and they're basically empty shells. And could possibly be reused. So Dynegy's ready, willing, and able to talk about that as well. So essentially, there's continued solid support from the public, the Harbor Advisory Board, the Commercial Fishermen's Organization, the National Estuary Program, and others for the city continuing on investigating this new boatyard and marine services facility in Morro Bay, and the triangle lot being the most logical location for it. There's several development possibilities competing for that triangle lot, as I stated earlier. Boatyard, Maritime Museum that the city's been committed to for, 20 plus years probably, since before I've been here. And parking, just general parking overall, and the possibility of exploring this promenade idea of reinventing our Embarcadero and needing extra parking there. So there's a lot of space there. We've got the triangle lot itself. But if you consider from the block wall that we recently shortened out to the street, the lot between the Triangle lot and the Front Street parking lot, the Front Street parking lot itself, the lift station in that yard with our oil recycling yard and the Harbor Festival and all the space back in there. There's a lot of space. And I think at this point, we really need to figure out what's going to fit in there. And if all three can fit, great. If two of the three can fit, which two? If 2.5, some combination thereof, I think that's going to be the next big step for the city to do, is decide which things are actually going to fit in there and then make a decision which ones we want to choose. Hopefully, they can all be accommodated in some creative way. There's certainly a lot of space there, but it's not infinite. And then knowing whether or not these elements can all fit is really going to inform us managers and decision makers on sort of what I'm calling a mini master planning. It's time to, if we're committed to this boatyard, we're committed to the Maritime Museum, which we are, we're committed to parking, we're committed to making that lot more than just a dirt lot. In the interim, we'll do some nice modifications to it. But in the long term, it's a big chunk of property, and it spells a big portion of this city's future. It's time to kind of look into a mini master planning and then see how that, I'm not the expert here, the two gentlemen in front of me are, but how that melds into the whole master plan, local coastal plan. The timing is right for that. In terms of if it will fit there, obviously you need to pick the boats up somewhere, and it needs to be somewhere reasonably close to the Triangle lot, if that's where it is. Straight across the street, somewhere between Stack's Wine Bar and Harbor Hut Restaurant, a lot of open water there. Obviously there's some slips in there. The slips between the South T Pier and Stack's, what we call our Beach Street slips, they, on our recently approved budget, we requested for and received funding for rebuilding those slips. Those slips, their time is done. They've served their useful life and beyond, and we're getting ready to start looking at rebuilding those slips. If the boatyard haul-out ways is going to fit somewhere in that neighborhood, now's the time to not rebuild those slips, hold off, and design around all of that. So the timing's working out pretty well for all of these things, for no one thing to jump way ahead of the other to get us to the point where, darn, we should have not done it that way. We should have done it a different way. We've got a chance to look at them all kind of holistically, and I think now's the time to do it. So again, as a next step, we're recommending that you authorize the Harbor Director to engage in a design professional to lay out some configurations and see how all that stuff will fit in. And as far as budget-wise, as you know, and I don't know the original number that was committed to 15-odd years ago, 20-odd years ago, we did put a large amount of capital outlay money into the Boatyard Capital Fund back when Rick Alger was here, and a lot of that funding got spent through the years for all those efforts that were done previously. When I came on the scene as Harbor Director, we had about $65,000 left. We're down to about $55,000. We've committed, and the council's committed to spending the next $30,000 if we get to that point for the feasibility study. So I'm rough estimate about $5,000 to have a design professional kind of lay this stuff out and draw it out and see if it looks like it can accommodate everything we need. And even with that, we've still got a little bit of money left in there. So it's all capital funds. It's already accounted for. No new funding requirements. So that's what we're recommending City Council do tonight, so we can keep this process moving forward and get some commitment moving forward on that lot. And with that, there's a lot of attachments. Again, there's a lot of moving parts to this. I'm open to any questions and hopefully get some good comment out here from the audience as well.
If I could just hop in with a summary. So this is a great, big, and exciting project, but I don't want to deflate anybody. This is not a huge council item for tonight. We're not making any huge decisions on this project tonight. Essentially what you would be doing, if you concur with the staff's recommendation, is you would be agreeing that the market analysis warrants going to a next step. The other, because if the market doesn't bear any consideration of a boatyard, then we'd be dumb to go spend $30,000, $35,000, $40,000 doing a feasibility study. So the first, and that's a significant thing, we believe it does. We believe the market analysis legitimizes spending the resources to go to the next step, the pre-planned step. It was always going to be two steps: market analysis and feasibility study. So the first thing you're saying is, yep, market analysis looks good enough to warrant a feasibility study. The next thing you'd be saying is, well, you could affirm that you've already allocated $30,000 for that feasibility study. But before we do this, we're sort of recommending one little interim piece, and that is spending a little bit of money to do this sort of master planning that Eric talked about of the Triangle lot area. And importantly, as he said, to keep options open for other areas. And it is likely that if let's say that a feasibility study of the Triangle lot said it was feasible and there was a way to do this and a public-private partnership existed to make it workable, not a whole lot would change if another piece of land in the same general area became available in a year or something like that. So I just wanted to sort of put those parameters on there that this is an important step, but we're not locking ourselves into anything by doing this. Really, we're just continuing to walk down this path until the doors shut or the doors are wide open.
Thanks. And with that, we'll open it for questions from council and then go public comment. Just briefly, how many people are here for public comment for this item? So we have about 30, 35, 40 minutes worth of public comment, unless people are pretty brief, but just basically we have about 40 minutes worth of public comment. And with that, we'll open up for questions from council, and I'll open up for Noah this time. I'll reach to I typically go one end to the other, but Noah, you want to start with questions?
Yeah, I'll try to be efficient here.
Matt did.
Couple of questions to lead off. One, we heard during public comments a concern about the environments and this sort of an operation having a negative effect on the environment. And the way I understand these sort of facilities, particularly modern day facilities like this, they are a boon to the environment in helping us address issues of maintenance and so forth in contained fashion. And I think that's one of the reasons why we see organizations such as the S-Ray program supporting this idea. But I did want to address that publicly today at some point. So if you wanted to confirm that, if that's possible.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Smuckler. That's a great point. I'm glad you circled back to that. Whatever type of boatyard, if it comes to be, gets built, it's going to be to the absolute highest environmental standards. That's going to be demanded by us by the regulators, but also, I'm assuming, insisted by us because that's what we want. That's the right thing to do. So it would conform to all the best management practices and all the clean environmental things. And that it is in an already industrially zoned location makes it an appropriate place. So absolutely, we would be sensitive to that, and that's one of the factors that makes that a suitable location. And you're correct, the positive that the boatyard would bring environmentally as well by getting those boats out of the water, get people that do small to medium-sized projects maybe in the water when they shouldn't be, but they don't have an alternative really to go to a boatyard because it's not big enough to go to a boatyard and spend that kind of time in that distance. Those projects will come out of the water, and we'll keep the expertise here, and we'll have more of those things going, and derelict boats and sinking boats and problems, being able to pull them out of the water. All those things add up to an environmental positive.
Great, thank you. And just to confirm also, from what you mentioned a little bit of the past study and moved beyond that, but as I understand it, the main holdup or challenge or flaw with the ideas and proposals was a permittable site. That's really where the project seemed to run out of steam and support from some of the regulators and permitting agencies like the Coastal Commission. Yeah,
correct. I think you're correct in that analysis. It was a permittable site. There were land ownership problems back then. All the space there at kind of the Coleman Beach and the lead out into the and down the dirt road and into the dunes over there wasn't all owned by the city. I think most of it is now, but there's still maybe some little private slivers in there. But back then there was a lot more ownership problems in there, and then funding to continue on and in terms of financial analysis and the assumptions of land acquisition, the high cost of land acquisition at that time made it not in the black. It was more of it was looking like it was going to be in the red. The last financial study we did painted it in the red just because of the high cost of land acquisition and permitting and all the problems out there versus where we are now. Obviously, a different picture, similar picture, but a different picture, and hopefully we can overcome those.
And one of the key differences is we control our own destiny on most of that property. We own it, and it would appear that the environmentally sensitive habitat areas that were one of the main hurdles that the Coastal Commission was focused on in the last proposals we probably will be able to satisfy those with the current site. Is a fair assumption.
Correct, absolutely, especially on the land portion, up into those dunes. That was a lot of environmentally sensitive habitat there, and now we're going off into an industrial site that's obviously, it's a boatyard's coastal dependent use. It fits all the parameters, and we're not having to scrape dunes flat to make it happen.
Okay, great. Another quick question is, we obviously got a lot of great supporting comments from various organizations like the Morro Bay Commercial Fishing Association, Estuary Program, Yacht Club, on and on. I'm assuming that the city at some point would be the central coordinator of all those groups to help pull together letters of support for grant applications and so forth. Is that a good assumption as well?
Yeah, I think as long as we're taking the lead on this, I'm assuming the Commercial Fishermen's Organization is going to stay a valuable and relatively equal partner helping us out with this, and they can certainly help. But yeah, we'll be the clearinghouse for when we go, if we go, hopefully, knock on wood, we continue to pursue those things. We'll be looking for that support across the board as we go to the regulators and permit folks.
Okay. Another quick question with the recommendations to continue outreach with Dynegy regarding the larger property and some alternative siting options, but then specifically to the out structure there, right on the property, right on the border of the property. I'm assuming that we're going to need to take the lead on that. That we'd prefer the best place for that communication is within the city, and my guess would be our subcommittee from the council would probably be, along with staff, would probably be the best group to approach that conversation, working with yourself and our subcommittee if necessary.
So are you talking about the building?
Exactly.
We're already working that. The staff is already working it. We talked to some folks from the Harbor Advisory Board. They gave us the idea. We've already started working the issue, and hopefully we'll see if it costs anything and how we'll work that. But oops, excuse me. Staff is working it right now.
That's excellent to hear. I know Dynegy in the past has been non-responsive or really hard to communicate with, so I was really glad to hear that you're getting some traction there at this point.
Yeah, we are, and I think timing's going to be tricky. At some point, they're going to get and continue to pursue the permits. I'm not sure where they are on that path. I don't know if Scott can maybe speak a little more to that, but eventually they're going to get permits to do that, and eventually they're going to need to commit one way or another, whether they're going to surplus those out or see if the city wants to take them in some way, shape, or form, and at what cost.
So sort of the broader picture, the city is sort of pushing Dynegy to reduce the fire load on the Dynegy property, which means take away buildings. So we're on the fire side pushing them to take those buildings down, and now on the other side we're saying, hey, we'd like one of those buildings. It's actually working out pretty well.
I actually talked to them today about it.
All right.
So yeah, I mean, we're in contact. They're finalizing their application. All of the materials that they have for the demolition application are in. I did have a brief conversation with them about about acquiring that building, and so we're going to, as they come forward with their actual application and paying for their application. I have the form in my hand right now, but we're going to be talking about what that would look like moving forward. So I mean, we're in constant contact with them.
Excellent. Okay. And then my last question, and I think it's my most important question, just talking about competing interests and knowing that we have, at this point targeted a really important property, large property for some high priority uses that are supported. Each and every one parking, maritime museum, boat facility, marine facility in our goals and so forth. As I understand it, our marine or the museum itself has really advanced pretty far into the process of showing the modest footprint that they're proposing in a concept form, working hard not to paint ourselves into a corner with that proposal and to make sure that it doesn't block any future options with the marine facility. So I guess I'm a little concerned because I know how hard they've been working and the amount of time they spent with city staff on starting to conceptualize that and how close they are to finally getting something on the ground. So how do you see us moving forward to avoid pushing them back all the way to perhaps the timeline with the schedule for the marine facility, and yet balance the need to look at this thing in a big picture?
So we agree that there's three important competing demands, and that's why we think it's wise to do this sort of master planning to see what could be. And we might find out all three work. We might find out that only two of the three work. And then we'll have to come to you and say, prioritize those and which way we want to go. The work that we're doing now, we've walked around several times with Larry. The driveway coming out of the Triangle parking lot and the driveway coming out of the Front Street parking lot, regardless of what happens there, whether it's a boatyard, a parking lot, or whatever, that needs to change because it's unsafe. And so we've got Larry's got a great plan. Staff is working closely with him. We're preparing to do the flat work there to move some curbs around and close off one of the roads. There will be we've walked it to ensure that the plan that we're going to put into place, the design that we'll put into place, would allow the triangle lot to be used for both purposes, both for a boatyard and or a parking lot, and the current designed location for the 10-year Maritime Museum doesn't impinge either of those. And in fact, it would be sort of nicely positioned if you had a maritime museum near a boatyard. And but so Larry's plan is there's maybe a 10 or a 15-year smaller building that does not impinge either of those. And then we will and do need to consider a future maritime museum that's slightly larger in this master plan. So, and what we will continue, but I think Larry's, I think, quite comfortable with where we're going right now, with doing the flat work around the entrances to get it safe, to make sure it's usable for all possible futures, and to get the boats moved, the display boats, and then to get the temporary 10 to 15-year temporary museum put into position right there near the entrance to the triangle lot.
Okay, so that's the distinction, because reading the staff report there, you could interpret it to say that we need to postpone all efforts going forward with the Maritime Museum until we have the larger master plan completed. That's more of the build out of the Maritime Museum, this short-term, small footprint concept to basically advance them just past beyond the kiosk, open up those existing parking spaces and so forth. That will proceed as is currently proposed and isn't going to inhibit any future efforts.
Unfortunately, it's not going to get done by the 4th of July, which was an initial plan. But yeah, we are pressing forward to get that done.
Okay. Good.
And we don't intend to hit the pause button, because we walked it and we believe they're all self-supporting. They what we're planning to do there with the flat work, with where the museum would go, where the boats would move, would actually enhance either a boatyard or a parking lot.
Okay, great. Thanks for the.
And if I can add, I mean, the Maritime Museum and Larry and his folks, they're very cognizant of the boatyard possibilities, and they're very thoughtfully designed around to make things movable and not sinking, caissons down 30 feet into the ground. They're doing a good job with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, may I just add something or a clarification?
Yes, thank you.
There was some language that was being used in the discussion about things not being safe. I think what the idea was that it's optimal safety, but it's not a unsafe condition of public property.
Thank you.
Just let me add on that. There's a potential conflict having two driveways right next to each other. It's not the optimal to have a traffic conflict there. So that's the condition, and we're looking to resolve that condition by closing off one of those driveways and then providing internal access between the two parking lots to serve that area.
And that's why we haven't opened up that parking lot yet.
Great. John?
I want to make sure. Thanks, and thank you for the presentation, Eric, very much. I appreciate it, and the staff report. One question, and you may have answered this, but what is a pre-master plan exercise as opposed to a master plan?
That's a word, the term I coined. I'm hoping it catches on. It's, as I say,
I caught you.
I don't envisage this as a true master planning exercise and all the planning and development elements that entails. We're looking at this lot along with the Front Street lot and everything around it to kind of mini master plan it to get a snapshot of seeing what can fit in there. And I'm calling that a mini master plan or pre-master plan.
Cool. I'm going to put it in my vocabulary here from now on. So thank you for that. Looking at the Morro Bay Boatyard and haul-out market demand analysis. So this was basically, the way I understand it, it was an exercise in basically sending out a questionnaire to individuals that either, the majority of which had boats here and were possibly or going to use the facility, and then about 10% that were outside of the area that we're visiting. And the response rate was about 20% of the total that were sent out. And did the consultants feel that that was, quote unquote, a robust response?
So I'll qualify your statement a little bit there. The surveys were sent out. LWC, Leasewise Consulting, also did fairly extensive interviews of folks and interviews of other boatyard owners, so it wasn't just purely relying on the survey questions. The survey results, they considered robust in that the number they got back, and I'd have to dig through pages, but I want to say 120-odd results back.
Yeah, 110.
Out of 500 boaters in Morro Bay, roughly, it's actually 450 some odd boats. But that number of respondents versus resident boats, they considered that statistically a very robust response survey. Even though every single one of those wasn't necessarily one of those 450 odd boats. That's where their methodology comes in.
And I don't want to split hairs, but it's not statistically significant, but that's for another discussion. The bottom line of it was that they believed that the potential revenue was somewhere between $1.1 and $2 million in terms of revenue capture based on this study.
Correct. 1.1 obviously being the low on the low end of the response rate. Their questions, obviously you've read it, their questions gave a range. Would you spend between this and that? And at the low end it's this, and at the high end it's that. Gotcha.
And given that there are a number of other boat haul-out facilities of different magnitudes up and down the coast, and one can look at those and look at their financials and determine if they are profitable. Of the ones closest to us, let's say the four mentioned in the report most prominently, do you know if they are profitable or not profitable? With regard to their overall operations?
Yeah, and without looking, I'll see if I can get them right. Port San Luis being the closest, it's not a normal haul-out situation there. It's kind of an open ocean, and it's difficult for them to haul. They require a certain amount of, I think, port input to keep that operation afloat, or the lease rate is pretty low. Although last time I talked to Steve McGraw, they're looking at restructuring and getting some better revenue, and their operators doing a little better as things have grown there and done better. Santa Barbara, absolutely, it's a small boatyard. It's kind of the model that we sort of hold up as being the small boatyard that's squeezed into the fishbowl right there in the harbor. That one's profitable. Gravel's, I think, is another one up in Moss Landing. It recently sold from the Gravel family. It's had some challenges there structurally from the stability of their site. That they had to put a lot of money into. A lot of port money got put into that just to stabilize their site because they had a lot of erosion and wave action that was affecting them. But that one, I think, is still, and we've got some fishermen in the audience here. Hopefully some of them can come speak to the activity in some of those yards. But I think Gravel's, and then Ventura, I believe, is the other one, Ventura Harbor Boatyard. And again, it's a little different model. It's a two lift yard where it's got a sort of a normal size lift that we're looking at, and then they've got a very large capacity lift, and they're fortunately able to serve a lot of the big oil service boats that operate out of Port Hueneme and Santa Barbara, so they've captured a different market, so they are profitable, but they've got a big boat population to draw on, big expensive boat population to draw on.
huge volume at a high price.
Huge volume and high price.
High pricing.
Big commercial boats that don't skimp on spending money.
One question that I had when I was looking at this, if you have demand and you know demand, and you have potential pricing, is it not fairly simple to analyze potential expenses and sunk costs and do a high-level feasibility study that could give this council a potential of return on investment and also a potential in terms of feasibility with regard to the possibility of having to subsidize or not subsidize the entity before we moved forward with actual pre-master planning, and not the detailed level that I think Lisa Wise Company normally does, but a higher level scenario plan that could basically give us a range of possibilities that might focus us in a little more in terms of the financials associated with the project?
I think I understand what you're asking, Councilman Heading. I think it's a good question. Which is the cart, which is the horse, and maybe they're side by side. And the idea of what you're saying is if you can get a better financial picture, it may say red, total red, forget it, don't bother going any further, or could go the other way around. Obviously, that's what we're hoping. Having a committed, at least a site that we're ready to commit to, and the cost. I mean, certainly there's costs that are fairly well known in the boatyard community in terms of fixed costs and personnel and certain amounts of infrastructure. It would take some fairly, I'm not going to say robust, but detailed analysis to really drive out what the costs are going to be for building it, because as we stated earlier, we're not just going to put a boatyard on a patch of dirt out there. We're going to build it to the best environmental conditions possible, which is going to be a considerable expense. And then coupled with that, what's our operating model? Purely private, we're going to build it, open it up for RFPs, we're going to do public-private, we're going to do it all public. There's a lot of nuances there that, while I suppose we could try and drill down on those more, it seems more logical to me to see, because let's say financially those do point to still, it can be in the black under certain parameters. We're still going to be back to the question of, okay, are we willing to put it here, or if everything else we want doesn't fit? That question still has to get asked, and I think that's a little quicker question to get at in terms of drawing it out to see how those pieces of the puzzle fit in.
Okay.
That's why I would recommend going in this direction. You're right. I mean, that's another way of looking at it, because financially looking a little further could spell doom and gloom. But if it doesn't spell doom and gloom, which we hope it doesn't, because we're optimistic. We haven't gone that far, but there's enough people that are in the boatyard business, both in Santa Barbara and a fellow that used to run a yard down in, that I think came and spoke at a Harbor Advisory Board meeting down in Ventura or Channel Islands, that's really interested in following this because he's wanting to be a part of it. So that tells us that we're on the right track, and the financials are passing the straight face test at this point.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John. I was going to continue on with questions as we pass them on to Matt and Christine. I just want to go back to one of Noah's questions and comments about environmental, and considering the question here about a new marine facility, boat haul out, would this be the first boat haul out marine facility built in the 21st century in California? It's 2015. Has there been a modern facility built in the state of California?
There, and maybe as we get some public comment, I don't know personally. I know there's been substantial upgrades to some. They all have to keep up with the environmental regulations. But has one been built from scratch in the last 15 years? Boy, I don't know. Okay.
So, and then the other question is, we've had other, sorry to throw you, that was a curveball. That wasn't even a softball, so sorry about that. Eric, we have gone through some lease agreements where we've required clean marine certification. I'm assuming that our own policy would require this facility to meet those clean marine certification policies. To piggyback on the previous question as far as how this facility moves forward. And I know these are a lot of questions that we will see answered once we get farther down the road, but in light of some of the questions tonight, I just want to just have a little light conversation on that.
Sure, and I'll take fastballs, I'll take slow balls, curve balls, just no knuckleballs. So yeah, and actually a boatyard built to modern standards and best management practice will help the Clean Marina program, because the Clean Marina program, one of the things it looks for is not doing boat work in the water. It's getting it out of the water where it belongs. So they really augment each other and emphasize each other.
Okay. And then also, Councilmember Heading's questions about cost analysis. Thinking this through, and thanks for the conversations you and I had today, talking through some of this. So hopefully, this is more of a softball than a curveball. But considering the WRF, the wastewater treatment plant, water reclamation facility, we've gone through analysis on that, and basically, using the analogy, we're saying that the cost estimates now are very, very rough estimates, and I'm looking to Rob because we're getting them, because that's where we're at in the project phase. And as we get a facilities master plan on our water reclamation facility, we'll be able to drill down and fine tune those costs to determine water rates, the true cost of the plant, and the facility. I'm imagining this pre-master plan, to some extent, will give us that. Will drill down and give us the opportunity to say, fit into that $1.1 and $2.3 million gross revenue, and we'll be able to kind of drill down those cost or return on investment analysis to give us a better information on making decisions. Is that a good analogy, good comparison?
Yeah, I think it's a good analogy. I think every step you take a little bit further as you put more information into it, it homes in on your goal and homes in on what you want to build, the size, shape, color, the things I mentioned before. And all that, obviously, cost is the driving factor in all this and what it's going to cost to build this. All those things inform those processes and can be used and would be used as things get refined. So if we get a look, okay, we're committed to this location, the lot, for all intents and purposes, is acquired at little or no cost by the city from Dynegy. It'll fit. Here's the size based on our criteria. Then we go out and start getting some of the numbers that we spoke of earlier that are sort of known industry standards, and then we apply our particular things and our particular needs for, okay, well, we've got to go across the street over here and go build it over here in the water, and those things start sort of coalescing or coming together and becoming known as you move forward and start looking into those.
Okay.
Did I answer the question? I just dance around it.
No, that's good. I think, and then the, where was I going? I had lost my notes here. I'll come back in a minute, but I'll come back in a minute before we go to public comment. Go ahead, Matt.
Sure. Eric, I have a question. In terms of looking at this, in terms of the recommendation you're looking for tonight, moving ahead with this, the amount of money to go ahead with this study, what's the time frame you're thinking about? You want to drop this on Harbor Board tomorrow and then move ahead with it in a month, or what are you thinking?
I wouldn't intend to bring back to the Harbor Advisory Board at all. I think we would find out who we want to commission to do this and start getting that going. And when we get a work product, I think, assuming opportunity knocks, which it does once a month when the Harbor Advisory Board convenes, run it by the Harbor Advisory Board, and obviously and the ad hoc committee, which is operating all the time. Harbor Advisory Board gets together once a month, obviously running it through the ad hoc committee and using them as sort of a sounding board, and then putting it through the Harbor Advisory Board as sort of the stamp of approval or the recommendation of what they want to do, and then getting it back to council. I would want to move as quickly as we could on that.
And do you foresee there any issues in terms of compliance with Measure D from Beach Street North? Or is this kind of part and parcel what that it was for?
The yard itself across the street is not within the Measure D zone. Obviously, the haul out on the other end would be in Measure D. if it gets to the permitting stage, I would assume, and this is where I'm looking and drilling holes in the front of the guys in front of me here, some sort of findings need to be made that it's Measure D compliant. I would just hazard a guess that a yard that serves a lot of commercial fishing boats and recreational fishing boats, hopefully the party boats, the Verges of the world, is Measure D compliant or would be considered Measure D compliant.
No, I know it seems kind of an obvious no-brainer, but I just want to have it out there because it is. And when people talk about Measure D, this is our little, fishing town on the shore is part of it. Next, in terms of the Beach Street slips, in terms of this time frame, and those slips do need work. How would you, in terms of this process moving ahead, is that you'd have to go through the planning stage in terms of looking ahead and how to redo those slips, or if you were going to, I guess that's just part of the planning phase, or what do you foresee those in terms of rebuilding those slips?
Let's say the boatyard didn't exist. I'd be starting to move forward on those slips sometimes this summer, fall, as time allows, I get going. Boatyard coming into play. Let's say we hire somebody to look at it. ABC Design Company, and everything looks like it fits. And we go to Harbor Advisory Board and Council, and everything looks cool, and we're moving forward. We move on to next steps of financial feasibility, and then we start looking at planning and permitting and funding and all the other things. Obviously not wanting to hold up the slip rebuild too long, I think that slip becomes, we kind of front load the process at some point with a similar analysis that we did on the parking lot across the street. Okay, the boatyard, the haul out ways is going to be a big thing to hold a 75 metric ton lift. Okay, what is the size, width, length of that? How do we best design it into that spot and design around it? Probably fairly simple to not necessarily build the ways at that point, but to design around it so that you could take out a component of slips and move the ways in, and when you build it, if that's 2, 3, 4 years down the line, obviously you don't want to wait too long for those slips. And then the slips we do lose, if we do build and if we can't redesign them, and we've got the space, and obviously the Verges proposal that's still standing out there that will eventually need to get revisited up against the pier there is kind of the extra space we've got to kind of replace things. So I think we design forward with that thought in mind, with sort of an erector set mentality that where we can unbolt something and move it out and move the ways in and still accommodate all the boats we need to accommodate in the meantime.
And then also my last question, thinking about the Measure D, fishing, sport, boating, and whatnot, what are some other industries that may benefit from having a boat haul-out facility in town?
Well, obviously, like I say, commercial recreational fishing, recreational boating, our operation and our boating needs, our Harbor Patrol, Coast Guard has expressed interest in it. What they need in terms of security and all that, I don't know. I suspect they need a yard that has certain force protection parameters, but they've certainly expressed interest in it. I know they pulled an engine out on the pier here a few weeks ago, and it worked. It wasn't the best thing they wanted to do with a crane, but going and sticking it in the yard and doing it in more controlled circumstances would certainly be their druthers. Fishing game might be able to haul, although some of those state contracts, they're stuck on their process and where they go because they bid it out, and it's not just whatever's close, it's whatever gets to bid. So those would be the main ones.
Well, I was thinking more in line in terms of jobs, in terms of bringing to town light industrial.
No, in terms of that, yeah, you've got shipwrights and skilled ship people, repairmen, welders, all of which we have spread around town, mechanics, riggers, those sorts of folks, and that's where, if assuming we move forward and we've kind of spell out under what sort of an operating model we have, that really indicates that you're going to have employees or you're going to have contract people, but those folks, like say diesel folks, welders, fabricators, riggers, woodworkers, we still have a number of wooden boats here. Although most of our owners like to work on their own, it still takes a certain amount of tools and skills and whatnot and know-how, and not everybody can work on a wooden boat, so wooden boat fabricators, tank builders and those sorts of folks, metal workers.
Okay, thank you, because it's not simply a simple process of just hauling boats out. There's a lot to go with it that could bring pluses to the town monetarily. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's an important point that while there are some of those already in town who have those different skills, a more robust facility would likely create demand for more.
Great. I'm just going to follow up with a couple questions. Thanks, Christine. I guess the first one, going back to the travel lift, when we're considering a pre-master plan, I think the word is catching on, Eric. When we get to that part, we're just talking about the triangle parking lot. I guess my thought is we need to consider looking at the whole thing. And so you're talking about the slips on Beach Street and where the travel lift might be located. So is that part of the scope and thinking about that part of the project in this, or are we focusing directly on the parking lot itself to encumber, all these things that we're discussing, Maritime Museum, boat haul out, parking, et cetera? And I'm going to keep going with my question because I think it's a broader view than that, and we had that discussion, you and I did, and so whether or not that view needs to look at the parking lot, the Beach Street parking lot, as part of this pre-master plan scope. Which my final question on that: if this expands, the scope expands on this pre-master plan thing, do we have the funds greater than the $5,000? Basically, we're alluding to expand the scope a little bit to cover that analysis or area. If we expand the area of refining more than just the parking lot, but include Beach Street and the lift, et cetera.
Sure, and it's a great question. And now with the discussion, everything evolved. I think incorporating the hallways into that sort of pre-planning, master planning to see how it would fit in the same sort of methodology is a great idea, because we want to identify fatal flaws there. Obviously, it's going to take some space and a path, so. and Maritime Museum and how it would all fit in. When the machine crawls across the ground, it's going to take a designated path. It's not just going to go between whatever cars aren't there. It's going to take an armored path that we're going to have to put a lot of concrete down. And that needs to be designed into the Front Street lot, because you're not going to go through existing curb cuts. So you're going to design the most logical path in and then rearrange parking and everything else around at Maritime Museum, everything. So, no, it's a great point, and I think we would absolutely want to do that portion of it as well, because it's fairly simple. It's not trying to squeeze different parts in so much. I mean, you've got boats and whatnot, but I think slips can be pretty easily rearranged. A finite space and trying to squeeze everything in can't. So I think absolutely we'd include that. Cost-wise, as I said in the staff report, and I apologize if it wasn't written out quite so clearly, I'll do math in public. I'm going to take the risk here. If we were to expend the $30,000 previously approved for the bigger financial study, and the $5,000 that I'm proposing estimated to spend to do this pre-planning in the triangle lot, we still have $20,000 left in that capital, roughly $20,000 left in that capital fund to spend towards maybe spending a little more than $5,000 and incorporating some of these bigger picture things.
Okay, all right. Thanks. I'll conclude my questions.
If I could
Pass
just,
it on
so
to Christine.
The idea of whether we're going to call it pre-master plan, conceptual, whatever.
See, it's catching on.
Well, I want to make sure that we don't think that we're about to put some pieces in place that can't be moved or changed around. It's really fatal flaws analysis is probably a better way to frame it. Of, is it doable there? That's really what we're asking in this. Is there a way to design this, and is there a way to do a boatyard and parking and Maritime Museum? Is that doable or not? And then it will take a significant, very detailed plan if we proceed down the path toward the triangle lot to figure out, okay, how would we do that with the armored path and the curbs and the parking and all of that. So this is really just conceptually of, is it possible or is it not possible in this location?
Great. Christine?
Wouldn't you love it if I said no questions? I have two simple questions for the staff and two for you out there in the audience, so I'll be expecting some responses to those in a minute. Okay, so staff question. Have we daylighted this at all with Coastal and any of our communications with them?
I have not, through my department. Scott, I don't know if he's had any conversations with Coastal.
Brief conversations, nothing real specific other than pointing at it and speaking with one of the coastal planners briefly.
did you get any, I know they're KG folks up there, but did you get any response?
No, they supported it. They thought it was a good idea.
Okay.
There was no concern that was brought forward when I mentioned it.
Okay, great. And then the second question is, when would it be appropriate to outreach to the neighborhood, the residents who do live up here, as well as business owners in the area? Just at what point in the process would we want to engage them? The reason I ask is because I see on one of the minutes from the Harbor Advisory Board that there is significant support for it, but there is one person who voiced opposition. And the reason I ask is because, of course, when it's your issue and you support it, you get a lot of people out. But the further, I don't want to wait too far in the process before we engage as many people as possible who would be around that area. So when is that appropriate?
I would think the first stop for that could be we do this plan that we're thinking about here now and conceptually put things in. Let's say the boatyard fits and the Maritime Museum fits, and this is the way it fits with parking. At that point, when it comes back to council, we'll go to Harbor Advisory Board. Obviously, you can take input there, but when it comes back to council for, okay, here it is, folks. What do you want to do with it? Do we want to go with this or not? That's a good point for getting some of that public input from the folks in the community that are concerned about it. Okay,
great. Sometimes I think just a letter or a postcard would help in the front end rather than when it comes pretty late in the process. Okay, and then two questions, because I know we're going to public comment. I was able to speak yesterday and today to Mr. Allward, Mr. Reisner, and Mr. McClish. There are the ad hoc folks that are coming off of the Harbor Advisory Board, and I have a whole notebook of things that I learned speaking to them, and just to recognize that they've put tons of extra effort. I know we've already said that, and I'm sure we'll say it again, but just I learned a lot from speaking to them about the process and the conversations they've had with staff and others. So I don't have a whole lot of questions now, but the question I do have for the audience is something that the mayor mentioned. Where would the newest boatyard in the coast of California be, the most recently developed? Because that is a question I had. And then this is very important to residents and other people, so we need to get some response. The quote from public comment earlier, some of you were here, was, "Old boatyards in other places are dirty, nasty, and smelly." So, of course, what do I know, right? I am not a commercial fisherman. You may be surprised to know that. So, but that's a very common question, and fair enough for that question. So I know there are environmental positives to having a state-of-the-art, environmentally conscious boatyard. But let's talk a little bit about your experiences. You all visit boatyards fairly frequently, and why would the public think that? And what would you want to share with the public who are listening to this as well that would maybe take the pressure off for them? Okay, so that's it. Thank you very much. Great questions, Council.
Thanks, Christine. And with that, I'll open up for public comment. And for those who'd like to come forward, please come forward at this time. Welcome. If you guys have any overheads or anything, if you want to let AGP know ahead of time so they can work with you, that'd be helpful.
Good evening, Mayor Irons, members of the council, staff. My name is Jim Phillips. I'm a resident of Morro Bay, and I'm here to support the Harbor Advisory Board's recommendations to the City Council. My focus of what I have to say has to do with the very broad economic consequences of providing services to boaters. Up till recently, I spent 35 years recreationally boating and recreationally fishing out of Morro Bay. First 15 of those years, I hauled a boat over from the Central Valley, which doesn't have much for boating over there. And during that time, of course, I bought fuel, I bought parts, I stayed in hotels, I rented a space in the RV park for a while. I ate in most every restaurant in town, went to the grocery store, bought bait and tackle, and all of those things during those 15 years. For the last 20 years, up till recently, I had an ocean-going boat that stayed in the State Park Marina. I paid slip fees there. And over the years, I used the two boatyards that were here several times apiece to have work done on my boat. One of those is gone completely now. The other is very limited in what it can do. With the repairs on my boat, I spent literally thousands of dollars over those years in Jody Giannini's chandlery, Stacy's Marine Supply, which was next door to it, where Jerry is now. I had Nick Howell, who's no longer with us, pull the engines on my boat and work on it several times in a very precarious way with a crane that went over the other boats in the dock and the parking lot onto the back of a truck. Only could get one out that way. The other one had to be pulled at the South T Pier. I've been to both miners' stores, the old one and the new one, and bought everything I can think of, including stainless steel screws that I couldn't get in the Central Valley. We had then too a marine electronics store in town, Radar's Electronics, I think it was called. Over those years, he worked on my boat. I bought radar and VHF radios and other sorts of things from him. And I even utilized the sales shop that used to be at top of the in the loft over the Sun Bulletin. Most of those businesses are gone now, and or are severely reduced in terms of the scope at which they can do. In my opinion, if we don't have the facilities for boaters, then we have no real reason to attract boaters. And I want to emphasize that the benefit isn't just to the boatyard or to the harbor department. It's to the restaurants, it's to the stores, it's to the hotels. People that come here to boat recreationally anyway spend their money when they're here. And that's an important part of it. And
Jim, I'm going to respectfully have to ask you to conclude the 3 minutes.
I spent some years on the Harbor Department, Harbor Advisory Board, I'm sorry, and the other thing that I just want to conclude with is, as a member of the Yacht Club and being port captain there, we serviced 300 boats in the year that I was port captain. Several of those needed parts that weren't available here, and they have to get on the phone and order them out of San Diego, wherever. But anyway, thank you for your time.
Jim, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Public comment is open.
Hi, Council. Tom Hafer, commercial fisherman and president of the Morro Bay Fishing Organization. To answer some questions, Driscoll's, San Diego, Mission Bay. About 30 years ago, they built Driscoll's. They closed down Kentenberg. Environmentally friendly boatyard. That's what we want. Boatyards these days are dusty. We have to use special sanders, which the city already has two that Morro Bay Fishing Organization bought and the estuary together. So the dust is not a problem. The noise, I've never seen a really noisy boatyard. Smelly, maybe the bottom paint a little bit. I think it smells good. But a new boatyard, you would have to make a lot of environmental things about it. For one thing, a place where you washed off the power spray, it'd have to be a sump into a filter that filters that water. We'd have to have that. So we could make it as state-of-the-art as we want. And a thing about having a boatyard and a parking lot together, that's not really a good idea. I mean, I don't know what you guys want to do with the museum thing. I don't know if you want to enclose all that stuff in a building or what, the big submarine or whatever, but where it is right now is probably okay, but a parking lot and a boatyard is not a smart thing because things do happen to cars around boatyards. They get paint on them and it's just not safe to have cars driving around where boats are on ladders and ways and, up in the air. A car would back into one of the jacks, it could fall over. That's dangerous. A better idea would be a boatyard with storage around the boatyard for sailboats and yachts and little sport boats where you could make money on that, renting a space, and then having 5 or 6 or 7 boats in the yard that we could fit in there around all the storage area for the sailboats and other smaller boats. That'd be the way to do. Not a parking lot around a boatyard is just not a good idea. And the triangle lot's the perfect thing. And the guys that build the travel lifts, the company travel lifts, they will come out free fly out here from, I think it's Wisconsin where they build them, and they'll look at the area we want to use and design it and tell us where the ways should go and how the travels will operate and what we're going to need. So there's things we can do to get this thing going, and I'm really supportive about the boatyard. Morro Bay doesn't have one. That's the only thing we don't have. It's a boatyard.
Thanks, Tom.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, Larry Newland, Morro Bay Maritime Museum Group. I'm going to speak a little bit about our project and then a little bit about what I think are some misconceptions about potential conflicts. At 22 years I've been at this project, and I have to, my hat's off to city staff and city management. We've never had this much collaboration, not even close. And in fact, it's gotten so good that I'm getting phone calls for people that want to send me money for the building. It's about a $30,000 building. And somebody wants to donate the electrical system, so it'll be a standalone off-the-grid system. And I'm having lunch with them next week. So it's because of all this enthusiasm and all this traction, and there's been some articles in the paper and so forth. We've tried to redesign this to be as innocuous as possible. So I want to be really clear about this. There is absolutely, with that plan, no conflict whatsoever with any parking scheme or any boatyard scheme. Now,
excuse me, Larry, AGP, can you show the video, the overhead, please? AGP, Can you show the overhead while he's talking? There you go. Thanks. I was looking for it on the monitor, and he was talking, so I just want to make sure. Thank you.
Okay, so
thanks. Sorry.
So anyway, we downsized this thing to make it just very innocuous, and it's resting on a heretofore pretty blighted dirt area. We're vacating 8 or 10 parking places. We're adding a full ADA spot. So we've designed the driveway throat for 24 feet, which could be modified easily up to 30 feet or bigger for a large travel lift to get through there. So I'm not sure if you can see that, but I can get you copies of that graphic. So not only are there no conflicts, so if somebody got up here earlier and said, you know, they supported our project but had something bad to say about the boatyard project, we don't feel that way. Speaking for the board of directors, not only do we support it, we want it as part of an interpretive component of the Maritime Museum. Having a working waterfront, a fishing village, without a boat haul-out facility is a little bit phony, quite frankly. It's a little bit like having like a Western front in a movie set, and there's nothing behind the building. So it's about time, and we're solely behind it. So there are no conflicts, and I'm glad, Mr. Smuckler, that you brought up about the commingling of the way the language was. I would hate to see this project kind of get entangled with the broader master planning or mini master planning, whatever the word was, the new term. The ship has kind of sailed here, no pun intended, and this project is moving ahead, and we're really enthusiastic about it. So I'm available if there are any questions, but that's all I had to say.
Thanks, Larry.
Okay.
If we just wave and keep the public comment coming on in. Thanks. Thank you, folks.
I'll keep it brief. My name's Rob, or Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name's Rob Seitz, and I'm a commercial fisherman. I'm here in support of moving forward with the feasibility study for the boat haul-out facility. To answer your question, some people say fish smell, but I don't think so, and neither do shipyards. But I'm proud to say that I fish in a fishery that's considered sustainable by Seafood Watch and the Marine Stewardship Council. And the stocks I see offshore are very healthy. I think our fisheries on the west coast of the United States are on an upswing, and we're in a good position to take advantage of that. An important part of a healthy fishing community is the ability to maintain your vessel, and that's something I think it would be important for a good fishing community. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob.
Mr. Mayor and council members, my name is John Bodine. I'm the current Commodore of the Morro Bay Yacht Club. And rather than explain all the reasons why the Yacht Club would love to have a haul-out facility, I'd like to dwell on something that is a little different. I have a letter here from a customer of mine. I also have a 100-ton master's license, and I do occasionally deliver boats. Most of the time I recommend people bring their boats and keep them in Ventura because of the availability of the haul-out facility and the availability of skilled labor to work on their boats and the ease of doing so. This is a letter from a Mr. Lowry, whose boat I delivered to Ventura. It says, to whom it may concern, I presently have a 23-foot trailerable sailboat in a slip at Lake Lopez. I have enjoyed, but now have grown bored with small lake sailing and have wanted to sail at Morro Bay. The task of putting up and taking down the mast would not be worth it on a regular basis. I hope you will consider this proposal of providing this parking lot where we could leave our mast up in dry storage. Also, the rangers at Lopez Lake say we will likely have to move our boats out of the slips by September because of no rain. Additionally, I have a Tartan 38 sailboat in Ventura in a slip. With having to have bottom paint every 2 years and general maintenance, I could not see keeping my boat in Morro Bay. I believe it would fall into disrepair like so many other boats now in Morro Bay. I think that a proper boatyard in Morro Bay would change the momentum, reputation, and would actually market to a higher group of boat owners for the area. I get tired of having to travel 2 hours through traffic to go sailing in Ventura and would like to visit my boat even when not wanting to sail. I would think others could feel similarly. Respectfully submitted, Alan Lowry. I think this is an important thing to consider, that there are a number of boat owners who have their boats in Ventura, some in Santa Barbara, that possibly would reconsider where they located them. And it would bring a higher group of sailors and yachtsmen to our area, which would benefit all the businesses locally also. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, council members. My name is Gavin Pruitt from Morro Bay. It's an obvious fact that Morro Bay is sorely lacking a working boatyard, and I believe it to be absolutely vital for a plethora of reasons. The Triangle lot, it seems really ideal for this haul-out facility and boatyard. It's large, it's level, and it's centrally located. And considering that this project has been going for so long, it seems like this should definitely take #1 priority. As I understand, Dynegy is not willing to sell just a portion of their property, but I also read that their application to modernize the plants with wave energy technology was denied. And so I think we should consider a compromise of some sort with Dynegy and possibly consider allowing them to modernize the power plants in exchange for the sale of that corner lot at a fair price. Let's not make the same mistakes that were made in the past with Duke Energy that put us in that fruitless stalemate. And finally, I'd like to add that I'm a published writer with a bachelor's degree in English from Cal Poly, and I would definitely be open to the opportunity to write grant proposals to help secure funding for the property, related infrastructure, and that 100-ton travel lift. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comment is still open.
Good day, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name's Stephen Pruitt from Morro Bay. I've been in the marine supply business for over 10 years. I own a chandlery up in Brookings, Oregon, and also we've started a new business here last year, currently in Los Osos, Rock Harbor Marine Supply. We would be interested in this opportunity, should it present itself here in the boatyard, serving our community with as a chandlery. Obviously, Morro Bay, somebody put it very well, it's almost like a facade when you have a, here we are in a fishing community and we've got all this marine and boats around us and there's no haul-out facility. And one thing also that hasn't come up, and I hope to, it should be a big concern, is the safety issue, not having a boatyard and forcing We lost the Tiger's Folly, as everybody probably knows, being towed down the coast. If we had a haul-out facility here, how many boats have left here in really unsafe condition because they didn't have an opportunity to haul out? So I think for that reason, I mean, Port San Luis is a good yard when you can access it, but it's not year-round that you have good access out of Port San Luis. If you go north, you're all the way to Moss Landing, or south down to Ventura. So I really think that this community needs us, and I would support it 100%, and we would like to be involved with that chandlery should it come about. This is Sue. Sue actually manages our store at here, and she has a few comments as well. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sue Streben, Morro Bay resident, neighbor of Rigmore, who thinks that boatyards are stinky, smelly, and dirty places. And I have sailed back and forth to the Ventura boatyard and had work done on the boat that I sail on that belongs to Pandora Nash Carner, and I can assure you that in general they are not dirty, stinky, or smelly. In fact, the environmental impact that that boatyard has is probably very minimal, and I think we're all aware of the reasons why, because there's integrity and environmental restrictions that are observed. What I'd primarily like to say is that during the 14 months that the Rock Harbor Marine Chandlery has been located in Los Osos, we have received a very hearty welcome by all of the boat owners in the community. Not only in this community, I have had people drive up from as far away as Ventura, Los Angeles, and down from Monterey to get parts from us. We have a black void, a black hole here on the Central Coast, and we've long been in need of a facility. Transient boaters are benefited by it. We have a lot of people who come down through Morro Bay and stay over here during the Baja Haha run. We have a lot of people making their way back up in inclement weather from the south, and I think that the Coast Guard and the Harbor Patrol have been well aware, and their statistics could give you more information about the need for a safe harbor here and a haul-out facility for those in need. Prior mentioned were the benefits to the community, the restaurants, hotels, the stores, as was mentioned, Ace Hardware, and I think the community in general would benefit. One of the things that I would like to note is that on my last visit to Ventura Boatyard, there were 5 Morro Bay boat owners in the boatyard. Each of those people was spending approximately $10,000 to $25,000 having their work done on their boat there. And I think that that speaks to the financial benefit of having the haul-out facility here. I have a lot more to say, but I'll save it for now. I'm sure there will be other times. Thank you, Eric, for all of your hard work, and the ad hoc community and the council for listening to our plea. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
Mayor, City Council, my name is Bill LaFay. I'm the chair of the Harbor Advisory Board, and I wanted to come up here tonight to recommend that you give Eric the go-ahead to fund this mini-study and to get this ball rolling. It's a necessity that we have a boat haul-out facility here in Morro Bay. It's not a wish, it's not a dream, it's a necessity. And you need to continue the process to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Anybody else for public comment? Come on up, Alan.
Hello, Mayor, City Council. My name's Alan Howard. I now live in Morro Bay. Moved here last year from Cambria. First of all, I wanted to say I'm on the Harbor Advisory Board and I'm on the ad hoc committee, and I can give you a little bit of a glimpse into some of the deeper deliberations we had. One thing that kept happening was every time we tried to move north and out, further out of town and into the wide open spaces, we would run into problems, environmental problems, and we always kept ending up back at the triangle lot. And there's 2 things going on there. That, it is a industrially zoned area, and you don't have any snails and the other things that they're trying to protect out in the dunes. And also the ways, when you start talking about putting those ways north of the intake building of the power plant, the support from the National Estuary Program starts to evaporate. They like that area for eelgrass, and I think they'd rather see the ways go further south, as we're talking about this near the South Teep here. The other thing is financial. The site, what your site looks like is going to play a big role in how financially viable it is. What we kept finding out was that in order to make it pay, you have to offer more and more services. The basic, take your boat out, put it back in, does not bring in a lot of money. Now, as a fisherman, I think that that's not so important. That's what we need is the basic function. And it'd be nice to be able to do everything else that makes it really profitable. But those things start to take more and more room. You need to have storage for stack boats and a lot of other things and also large yacht projects where you have a building with a lot of services and a lot of different contractors working on the thing. That stuff can all come later. And maybe it would be possible for the boatyard to expand there in the Triangle parking lot, and maybe the Dynegy property, something adjacent would become available down the road. That would be ideal. I want to support the Yacht Club's bid for a jib crane and the rigged sailboat storage. I think it's an important need. One of the things that government likes to see in grant proposals is providing additional access for people. We have a limited amount of slips. There's only so many places a person can tie a boat up. If you start to provide places where people can keep their boat out of the water, fully rigged, and go in the water, then you've opened up new possibilities and expanded access to the ocean. And I'll just end up with that. Thanks.
Thanks, Alan. Anybody else for public comment?
Mayor, City Council, my name is David Hensinger. I think I'm the first person not from Morro Bay. I enjoy coming to Morro Bay for recreational boating, involved in the bay fleet, occasional ocean racing, and the availability of maintenance facilities and be able to haul out would make a big impression and make a major factor the amount I would be willing to become involved with ownership of a boat and expanding that involvement with the bay here in the ocean here in Morro Bay. And to speak to dirty haul-outs or smelly haul-outs, I would recommend taking a pleasant afternoon and going down to Santa Barbara, down by their Maritime Museum, which is huge, and just sitting in a little Japanese restaurant. If you sit on the corner there by the Japanese restaurant, you will suddenly notice that there's a 10-ton boat moving right behind you. Huge, quiet, and what a thing to look at. You know, I would like to have the restaurant that has that view because it's a real eye attractor and people want to sit there and watch it all day long. So I'm strongly in favor of you guys moving forward and providing this facility.
Anybody else for public comment?
Mayor, City Council members, I am the second person here tonight who is not from Morro Bay. My name is Laura McCarran, and my husband and I live in Atascadero, but we have had a boat in Morro Bay for over 28 years now. And every time we've needed to haul out, we've had to go down to Port San Luis, and we actually brought our boat up from Ventura. It was a hard decision knowing that there weren't really a lot of facilities in the area, but we chose to bring our boat up here instead of driving 2.5 hours to go to the boat. There have been times when we've been sitting in the boatyard at Port San Luis for 6 weeks waiting to get our boat back in the water just because there was not the opportunity because of the surges and the way that a facility is open out to the ocean to put our boat back into the water. Morro Bay needs a viable, thriving boatyard to keep up with the idea that Morro Bay is a boating community. It's a harbor. It's on the ocean. People want to see boats here. Transient boaters that come down from Northern California that stay at the boatyard. Stay at the yacht club. There's so many times we run into them saying, "Where can we get this? Where can we get that?" well, there's really no local place for you to get any of the services that they needed, or even be able to haul out, do a quick haul out to check through hulls, to check transducers, things like that. So we're hoping that we can move forward on this. Morro Bay would definitely benefit by having a boatyard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, and staff. I just want to thank you for your continued support over the last few years as we've been dealing with this. Oh, by the way, my name is Dana McClish, and I'm on the Harbor Advisory Board and also the Ad Hoc Committee that's been working on this. And I want to really thank staff, the Harbor staff, for all the hard work that they've been doing and listening to us. And this staff report was really good. There was a lot of things I wanted to bring up, but they were already in there, and you guys have asked a lot of the great questions. A lot of the things I wanted to say, I want to answer questions from you, more or less. I'm trying to remember all those questions, but the feasibility study, we were looking at trying to gather that criteria so that we could more accurately go into a feasibility study. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that. I think when you look at the two big industries in our city, you'll see commercial fishing and tourism. And neither of those exist without the harbor. And the harbor, the boats in the harbor, they require a certain amount of infrastructure. And so we're looking at this as an infrastructure need, but at the same time, you have heard over and over businesses that would come in, subcontractors, many of those that are lacking, that went away when there was a boatyard that closed down in the middle of the Embarcadero. A lot of those businesses went away. The haul-out facility, the marine facility, is the hub of that industry. And when you talk about economic redevelopment, which we like to talk about, and we need for our city, this is an industry that we can create, and we can take care of our boating community, and for visiting yachts also, and the fishing fleets that come up and down the coast, we can finally be known as a place you can stop, and you can get hauled out, you can get services. And it was mentioned earlier about the 300-some boats that come and visit the yacht club, because we are the official host when travelers come in. This is come to the point where they bypass us because we don't have those facilities. We hear that from people. They say, we really want to come here, or we love it here, but we were just buddy boating with some people and they just went right past. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer questions. I think I'd love to take people on a field trip to Santa Barbara or one of these other boatyards and see what a tourist attraction it really is. Everybody loves to see a travel lift cruising by with a big boat on it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dana. Anybody else for public comment? Seeing none, I'll close public comment, bring it back to council. Thanks for everybody for their work, their participation, their comments through the public comment process, and I'll turn it over to council for discussion and or further questions that might have been prompted through our public comment. Christine, do you want to start us off?
You know what? I'll sell my start to Matt or John.
Okay, I'll start it off then.
Or you start, yeah.
I'll start
That's
it off
okay.
then. Thanks. First off, I just want to thank our ad hoc committee for the work they did and our Harbor Advisory Board taking on this project. Obviously, the staff report told the history. I was reviewing the 1998 feasibility study today as well, and there has been a lot of work put into this. To say that 1998 it didn't happen just means that this continues to come along until the time is right, and to a certain extent the timing is right. So to get it out of the way, I do support moving forward with this, but I have some distinct comments that I want to make with this. And some of the comments that I did during my questions was the expanding the scope. One of my thoughts on looking at the triangle parking lot in of itself, if we're going looking at that, and I know some pre-master plan concept thing might be just preliminary, but I want to ensure that we don't look at something without opening up our view a little bit beyond that, and we're not boxing ourselves into what is a neighboring parking lot owned by the city, which is the Beach Street parking lot. And I also want to understand that if the travel lift goes by the South T Pier, that, how is that going to fit in there? So I just want to make sure that as we're doing this, and I would, open this up for discussion with council, how we go about it. Because looking at one piece of it without looking at the other components, I want to be really diligent about this. So I know there's there's a sense of maybe not urgency, but passion to keep it moving, at a stronger pace. I'm sharing my comments about being diligent and how we go about this. So those are my comments there. I know, Eric, thanks for talking with me today through this at length. Bill LaFay, I talked with you today at length. Thank you for those conversations. It was helpful. I'm sorry, Dana, if I didn't get a hold of you and so many others, but that was the way it worked. Part of my comments today, in addition to looking at the field of view that I just described, was I don't need to drill down to the, all the little details, but, I think we had considered, smartly so, that there are some Beach Street slips that maybe we should put on pause until we figure out some more details of this project. I would also consider, do we need to modify that South T Pier and clip off one end so you have a straight run and you're not going into those other slips and you can still have those slips or expand them. That's getting in the weeds a little bit. I don't want to get any further than that, but those are some thoughts on that. One of my bigger concerns through this is that though we hear all the support for moving ahead on this, I shared my comments with Bill today and Eric on this, and through the short 2.5, 3 years being on council, there's a different perspective on the city other than just the view of the Harbor Advisory Board and the harbor needs in of itself. There's a lot of needs going on with our city, and we had a really good budget workshop and session that we and the community got to learn about our financial status. Not dismal, but things we need to be considering. Having said all that, I'm very, very cautious about building an infrastructure that is not sustainable. And I think that's one of the priorities that when we come back, and Eric, thanks for your staff report, but when we come back with this, I think I would like to see us come back with that PowerPoint presentation that goes into the details of what that pre-master plan is going to look like. Some of the fine numbers that I'm hopeful that Councilmember Heading will ask for in a little bit more detail as well. But seriously, there's support for this. There's a lot of things lining up to move forward on this. But one of my biggest concerns is, first of all, you want it to be successful, and so. If it's successful, it's a thrivable. One of our public comments we had is it a thrivable boatyard? That's what you want. If this comes out to where it is a not economically feasible boatyard, haul-out marine facility, then that's a hard question for this council to consider. And we have other questions that the council is considering about how we subsidize other areas of the city. And so those my comments about how we move forward on that, I think I covered fairly well so far. The compatibility issue between a parking lot and a boatyard, I think those are good comments. I recently went up to boatyard up in it was Oakland area. I can't remember which one it was, but it's right there. You have everything there, parking lot, facilities, and when they're doing any of that type of heavy work, they're tending their equipment. They've got all the components in place to make sure that you don't have particles and debris going on automobiles and the environment and the watershed and everything else. So I know that part of the facility can be taken care of, but I hear some of the compatibility issues with parking lot, especially considering historically when Morro Bay Power Plant used to pay some of the boat owners and other people in town when early years when they used to burn oil and the particles would come out, and they would cover a lot of costs for different things in the community. So that said, I think I've covered some of the things I wanted to cover. Great work by Lisa Weiss Consulting, our ad hoc committee, Harbor Advisory Board. Thanks, staff. Eric, thanks for taking the time. Scott, thank you for taking the time with me to talk about some of the details of, the bigger picture of the other parking lots. And those are my comments. And then I'll look to my left, or my right, Mr. Heading, and maybe you can take off from here. Thanks very much for your comments. Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I would agree with your outline of what was presented. And I'm going to add my thanks. I've been watching you guys on TV. And by the way, you look pretty good on TV. So I have followed your meetings, and that includes the reports that your subcommittees have given, as well as Eric's input, which has been stellar, by the way. And so my compliments to you with your ability to feed back information to your constituents that you serve. Excellent job with that. Bill, thank you for your leadership. And Alan, subcommittee member, and Dana, thank you as well. I listened to your reports through your meetings and have read in detail the report from Linda Weiss. I've gone online and studied other boat facilities up and down this coast to look at what the components are. I understand. No, I don't understand the industry in detail, but I do understand, I think, a bit of the vernacular now that's beginning to become clearer to me. But fundamentally, the issue for me as a council member is that this is a piece of a larger pie that the mayor spoke of that speaks to economic diversification, which is absolutely necessary for this community, and also the sustainability of an industry that has been the very root of the community, in my opinion, and that is the fishing industry. And wherever it may well be located, fundamentally, it's going to come down to the feasibility of it and the amount of contribution that the city may or may not have to make, and or if the model doesn't include the city as the owner, so to speak, then it's a very different picture and very different scenario. Most of what I've heard, and this is not putting anybody down, is anecdotal information. And anecdotes are great, and I believe what I hear, but statistically they're invalid. The Lisa Weiss study gives me one thing, or it tells me one thing. There may be $1 to $2 million of revenue for a boat haul-out facility. Now, that study, to me, is not all-inclusive and is not the most stellar study in my mind for a number of reasons. One, it's incomplete. Two, again, it's not representative statistically of a significant sample of potential users. And thirdly, it does not get to the core of the issue, and that is really the other side of the pie, and that's the cost, including the sunk costs of what you're going to put in with regard to the facility. And the sunk cost would be, what are the components? And again, I'm not going to pretend to be able to name them, but what is this thing, this boat haul out facility, and what is the cost of the infrastructure associated with that? And so that's one piece of it. And then two, operationally, that's a no-brainer. I mean, you can go online and you can pull operational costs out for boat haul out facilities that are pretty standard numbers, and you can build a very dynamic model without spending $50,000 on a feasibility study that pretty well outlines the feasibility and return on investment for this kind of an entity. And I really think that has to be done. I really think that has to be done. I don't think it takes $80,000 worth of consultants to do it. I believe internally we probably have the expertise to do it. Because I found the information online, and I've built the models before and had models built for me by my staff, and it's not that difficult. It's in terms of the bottom line, what you believe with regard to the information that goes into it. So if it can be cited on the currently recommended site, that's a small piece of really what I'm looking for, and that is this going to be one of the things that fits the economic diversification picture that I'm looking for this city, that's going to have a return on investment that allows us to be sustainable in the future? Because if you listen to any of our city managers' presentations on the 10-year feasibility study that was done by management partners and our 10-year budget, you will see that the lines basically are together. That is the revenue and expense lines, which means we have literally no money for capital investment for this city. We don't have money to fund the infrastructure for our roads, and that's another item on the agenda tonight. And so without going deep into financial analysis, bring me a feasibility study that gives me a sense of, hey, is this going to cost the city $1 million a year, or $500,000 a year, or are we going to make $500,000? And I'm ready to turn you loose and let you go and say, let's get it to happen. The other thing I want to do is support the comments in here that say, let's move. I'm new to the community, but you've been talking about this, some of you, for a long time. Let's shorten the timeline. Let's get it done. Let's determine the feasibility now. Maybe that changes in 5 years. If it's not feasible now, I don't know. But let's set a timeline that is quick with regard to turnaround. Let's bring the information back, allow us to have what we have to make a decision, and possibly move forward. I've been to that restaurant. It's a great site. I hate to use the word novelty, but I could sit there for hours watching those things float overhead, and it's fun, and it doesn't smell, and it's kind of neat. And I think it would attract a lot of people. So without belaboring things, thank you so much for all the work that you are doing, have done, and will continue to do. And for me, this small piece I could support, but it's the bigger feasibility piece that's important to me. And the sooner that gets here, the more quickly I think we move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Noah?
Yes, thank you. I also agree we need to continue to prioritize this. And you talked about some of the economic benefits, and what we heard tonight, I think I completely agree with. There's many indirect economic benefits to this. And so if we want to look deeper at the financial component and return on investment and so forth, I'm sure that would be included. I'm a little cautious about calling for a very specific and in-depth study at this point. I tend to agree that we need to understand the placement and the siting and answer those questions, the size and so forth, before we can start to even dig deeper in the operational structure and so forth. I think looking at the benefits that this sort of an operation brings to the community and the number of organizations that support and need this sort of facility, we're going to have a very strong position for additional funding sources. You think about the public safety, the environmental component to this, the economic driver of this. I kept on finding new reasons to the public access and recreational components. There's so many different things that this helps. I have to think that this will be a strong project in a lot of different grant and alternative funding scenarios. So I'm looking forward to getting there. I think there also will be a number of innovative ways to structure this, public-private partnership concepts with contracting to keep the city's costs and the sustainability side of the operations really as a key component, because the last thing we want to do is launch something that we all need and not do it in a way that we can sustain. So I think everyone's there on that. I thought Mr. McClish's comment about this being a hub of our harbor operations was truly right on. And I'm thinking that we need to talk about the boatyard and the haul-out facility as a priority over the parking component, which would be nice and I think is going to be needed. But I'm also aware of some alternative additional parking opportunities in the community, and we're going to need to work through that question, but my sense is we have very limited options for a boatyard and more options for the parking. So I'm hopeful that we're going to find ways to look at both. I think that this analysis, this next phase, is going to help us understand that better. I agree with Mayor Irons about looking at the hoist component and having that be included, because that's a question I think in all of our minds. And I thought the suggestion by Mr. Hafer to reach out to the travel lift companies that exist and see if they can come to town as soon as possible with some free assessment, that was a really interesting idea. And I'm confident that our Harbor Advisory Subcommittee, working with our staff, can really dig into this more and ask those questions. They have a lot more expertise than we do, certainly. So at this point, let's keep this thing moving. I'm glad the the museum is on track and going to be able to initiate their next small phase, and we're going to keep the ball rolling on this.
Thanks, Noah. Matt?
Sure. I say we charge right ahead with this additional $5,000 to start this next phase, because with the market analysis, the subcommittee from Harbor, they always wanted to do a feasibility study. They're saying, look, this is the next phase. But as Eric is saying, part of that is going to have to do this preliminary work. Given that we just did that 10-year study, looking ahead, we know that we can't put all our eggs in one basket for the tourism industry. It would be kind of ludicrous to do that. And so this plan is talking about monetary diversification, looking ahead in terms of the light industrial, the jobs it would bring to the city, the tax base. So looking on that way, this $5,000 that Eric's asking for is a small drop. And even looking ahead at this last study cost, I think, $30,000. And if we find get the other players to put another $30,000 in there after we spend that $5,000 on addressing some of those major components, this is a big deal. And I think it's more than just a superficial window dressing of addressing what the small fishing village needs. I think this is a responsible way of addressing the economic or various economic drivers in the city. There you go.
Thanks, Matt. Christine?
Okay, great. Well, you're going to be so excited when you look at the staff report and realize that's exactly where we're headed. So it's excellent. So under the discussion on the staff report, I'm not going to read it to you, but the second, I printed it, so I'm not sure what page it's actually on, but it's in the staff report. It is probably the third page of the staff report. Paragraph 2, under discussion, midway, most needed and logical next step is authorization for the harbor director to engage an architect or other design professional to take requirements of each of the competing and complementary elements and determine how they may conceptually fit into the entirety of the triangle lot and all city property and rights of way surrounding and adjoining it. So reading that after hearing our discussion and all the things that have been said, I feel confident that the staff report captures now where we are, which sometimes you don't know. So I'm confident that the direction here that we would give by specifically mentioning this paragraph then allows the analysis to include all city-owned property near and around the triangle lot. Is that clear? I think that's pretty clear from the staff end. Okay. one or two things in addition to mention, and I would just say, it takes a lot to get to all agreement with most people in the audience tonight, so it's kind of fun to have us all sort of on the same page for the moment. It won't last, but at any rate, 3 goals that we're working on here tonight specifically are City Goal 6E, which is under support economic development. 6E is Marine Services Facility, so we're working on this. We're working on goal number 6H, which is to continue forward momentum on various projects, including Maritime Museum. And we're working on goal 7, which the heading is Improve City Infrastructure, Facilities, and Public Spaces. Goal 7C can convert the Triangle lot to temporary parking and plan for its future use. So when we set our goals a few months ago, all of these things were priorities for us, and we're actually working through them in a way that makes a lot of sense, and I think we can all recognize the effort that we spent, staff and council and public, encouraging a goals document that's actually living, and we're using it, and I think it's to be commended for everyone involved in the process. So just wanted to point out that we are moving forward on identified priorities at the right speed, which is pretty quick actually on some of these things, considering we approved the goals not too long ago. Another thing I'd like to mention is I think it makes sense to engage a very visionary and creative design professional at this stage to do our site analysis for us. It doesn't have to be super deep or intense, but I think if we're looking for folks to come and help us, who is available, perhaps with other coastal maritime experience. So maybe they would cost a little more than $5,000, but I think at this point it might make sense for us to consider a little bit more of an investment. Especially given what I've just reported and what we seem to agree on in the staff report, that we're looking for an encompassing view of all of our existing facilities there that we have control over. So I would just encourage us to maybe look pretty broadly. Obviously, you don't want to go too far out of the box with that, but certainly somebody who's had coastal maritime experience, if we could get that. How creative can we be with the space in a city-owned or city-controlled space? So, it's hard to look at that power plant and say, oh my goodness, there's acres and acres of property there. But, it's just not on the table at this point. It doesn't mean it won't be. It doesn't mean it won't be tomorrow. It's just not tonight. So I think we're really smart, and many of us have commented about the ability to do something with city-owned and city-controlled space. So that's a benefit we have. Have we fully utilized current city-owned properties around the Triangle lot? Likely no, but that's because we just received the Triangle lot. We've been talking about it, but we didn't officially take ownership until it's been 6 months or so, maybe 8 months, that it's been officially Morro Bay's. So, before it's been something we've thought we had, right? Less than that? 6 weeks. Okay, we've had it for 6 weeks. Okay, well, right. So you can't really move forward in some ways if you don't legally own the property. So, it is now ours, so it gives us more freedom because now it falls under city-owned and city-controlled space. So wanted to make a note of that. And outreach to the community, I would just like to say it again, to encourage it as soon as it's appropriate, but please not to forget about it. And think of it as any other kind of development project. If I, again, obviously, through my comments, am supporting a site analysis, and I would love to see us reach out to the neighbors above and around at a fairly broad scope to get them involved and get them out and early to hear some of their concerns. I think we addressed a lot of the concerns tonight that the general public will have about a boatyard, and I think we need to do ongoing communication and education of that. Lastly, in my opinion, it's just the way it is. There is an inherent, likely bias a little bit in the Lisa Wise study, only because Lisa Wise consultants have been studying our fishing industry for several years, and obviously they've been reporting fantastic things about the economy as it compares to fishing. So it was not a surprise to me, and likely no one else, and probably likely not to the staff at Lisa Wise either, that their market analysis was going to come out pretty strong, because a lot of their other previous work has shown that this is an industry we can count on, and it's growing in Morro Bay and doing better than most. So what I would like us to see is when we move into our deeper financial analysis is that we find a very, very unbiased and objective firm to do that for us. Because it's not fair, to have, and also it was funded through, I think maybe some of the cable money came through as some of the grant funding. So, we just want to have the most clear and objective data we can have. That's what we do best, making the best decisions when we have really unbiased and objective data. And we've been pretty good at doing that the last, with this council, we've been really able to do that with tools we haven't had before in the budgeting. So I would really encourage us to look to that in the future and to make sure we're getting the most unbiased information. And bias, I should say, in a positive way. If Lisa Wise was biased, it was to encourage us to perhaps do the right thing to continue something in our economy that's working for us. Okay, so without going too much further in repeating things you've heard tonight, I am willing to hear a little bit of, do we want to put a dollar number on things for the site analysis, or are we comfortable, council side, that it's going to be enough to get us something that we can really make some good decisions based on at this point? So I think that's all we're asked to do tonight, is do we want to move forward into site selection? That was our question tonight, right?
That's where we're at with
Right.
some added language that you so eloquently clarified for some of our discussion. Thank you.
Oh, you sound like my mom, always telling me I do a good job. Thank you.
Yeah. So, we can look to staff as far as the cost amount, and I alluded to that in my comments as far as if we expand the scope, how much do we expand that dollar amount, and if there's a comfort range and we want to have that discussion, I think that this would be a good time to do that. And I can see some huddling going on back and forth between Scott and Eric, so everybody's looking for a microphone at this point, but I think we might be able to come up with something.
I guess I'd like to say I would like to think I had the authority to wiggle in there and do the right thing. But if I need your approval to say 10,000, then say that, and we will do the best job we can for the least amount of money we can.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I need your approval to do that, but since I don't know that, if you'd give it to me, then that'd be great.
I think he gets it.
Yeah. Was there any, I'm looking towards Scott and Eric because I know you were huddling a little bit. Do you have some additional comments on that?
I was just talking to him about what recent cost estimates I have on public outreach opportunities that would, if you're doing workshops, there's a cost that goes along with those. If you're doing, different types of outreach, there's a cost associated with that. So I was giving him some cost numbers so he could take that into consideration when you pushed it back at him and thought, hey, is that enough? Because you were talking about maybe telling him.
Yeah.
And we're not, when I say 10K, we're not talking about much, if any, public outreach. This is a sort of just a technical fatal flaws piece.
Right.
And we can do some messaging to communities and mailers and that sort of stuff completely separate. But once we start asking a firm to help us do public outreach and input into a master plan, that goes through the roof.
Exactly. Christine, you want to follow up?
I think I do. I would like to be really clear about my public outreach, just so we're set the record straight. I'm talking about a postcard, which I think I may have asked. I think when we're engaging in an infrastructure project that is not in existence now, which is essentially what we're doing, we have a parking lot there that has been not used very well for many years, even when Donna G, before they closed down. So I would just ask for creative ways that don't cost us a lot of money or take a lot of staff time to, I don't know, something that would be similar to what we do in another development situation where we're just noticing the neighborhood that there's something at the council meeting they might want to take an interest in, and it could be a simple something in their water bill that they get at those addresses within 500 feet or 300 feet, whatever. I do not expect, nor did I intend to set into motion workshops. Because my assumption will be that's what the council meeting will be for when we have a site selection response. But I just want to make sure we're doing outreach to that particular neighborhood because it is an impact on them that where there's nothing now, there will be something. That's all. Does that sound good? Everybody's okay about that?
And if I could,
I think. And I guess the other question is on cost. I mean, our staff report indicated a specific cost, and I just wanted to, Dave. I know you said, hey, we're looking at it. Do we need to authorize that? I just think there's a comfort zone with that as well. I mean, there are some indication to it? Do we need to discuss that in detail? But I think there's some clarity with council, and does the rest of council feel there's a level of comfort in how far we're going to go as far as authorizing or just expanding the scope? Just in general discussion.
Yeah, I think it's important that we give staff and the committee the leeway to pursue the most effective piece of information in this next phase. And
yeah.
I'm comfortable with that decision as they come up with it.
As am I. Just want to make sure we have that. We close the loop on that. Okay.
So do you want to put a not to exceed $25,000, some number, just so that they have some range?
Yeah, and I would think even not to exceed 15 would be adequate. Do you think? I mean, I'm looking for head nods, or give some.
I think it's adequate, and I'm jumping in a couple of reasons. One, we, as previously stated in our capital project, which is a carryover, continues to carry on. It has carried on. We haven't never closed that account. There's $50,000 there available, so the funding is there, already authorized. Great that we get another sort of reaffirmation of it and a number if we want to put a not to exceed on it. What I want to make sure I clarify is where we're going. Obviously, putting the pre-master plan together and putting those pieces of the puzzle together, including across the street for the marine haul outways and those alternatives over there. There was a fair amount of talk. I know we discussed financial feasibility and which is the cart, which is the horse. Do you want to bring back, or do you want us to bring back some, I want to call it rudimentary at this point for lack of a better term, financial analysis based, staff based, and maybe even consultant based, but more staff based in terms of, okay, here's the picture, here's how our consultant drew it, here's our first line financial analysis of it from revenue standpoint that LWC says we're going to have, and some rough orders of magnitude of cost, and some potential operational models. Again, I'd have to dust off my economics PhD hat, which I actually don't have, but we can do that, some degree of that in-house, and do you want that as part of this, or do you want that to be a next step after this? That's something I'd like to have clarified.
John?
Absolutely. For me, a high-level financial pro forma, either done in-house with a determination of what the sunk costs are in terms of what are the capital pieces that you're going to buy, build. What are the average operating costs for such a facility? They're out there. You have this revenue estimate, although it's wide. Put the two together and you get a bottom line. And I think it's as simple as that. And I don't think that that's the answer or the final. I think that gives me a better clarity with regard to siting and future in terms of economic development. So at the same time, I'm comfortable with your $5,000. Personally, I'm comfortable with your $5,000 look.
Okay,
for your pre-master plan,
right?
Whatever we're calling it.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of discussion. I just want to make sure that that's something we wanted to include in that.
Christine, you had some comments?
I just, in discussing this, I wanted to refer to some of the notes that I took when I was speaking to the ad hoc committee, and several of them, I think all, said that through the discussion the last several months, they realized that the financial feasibility needs to be done, absolutely needs to be done, and what we got with the Lisa Wise was a market analysis of a sort. But they all identify economic feasibility is next. However, unless we can commit as a city to a site. So for me, I agree with you. After I did a little outreach, I realized, it's true. We need to decide as a community if this site that we've all been talking about is even possible. Because we haven't necessarily even had that conversation at all yet. This is as far as we've gotten in the conversation about, tonight's the most we've been able to talk about, does the Triangle parking lot plus other surrounding areas even meet the need? So from there, I'm comfortable going to site and then recognizing, and I think we've been pretty clear, but once we have site, the next place we're going, depending upon the outcome, if it's at all green light, go right to economic feasibility. And I think that's what the ad hoc committee, at least my understanding from conversations with them, is they're identifying this too.
Well, then I'll bring up the notion of alternative use for the site that may have greater economic benefit than a haul out. And so what if there's economic project B that is going to be more advantageous to the city? So I disagree. I absolutely disagree that you can't say, I don't feel that you can say, this is going to be the site, now let's see if it's feasible. Well, if it's not feasible, why are we even looking at a site? And for that site, personally, I would want for the city the most economically feasible project that we possibly could have, and eco-appropriate.
No, I know you want to make a comment, but I'm also looking at Eric. I think he wants to weigh in. So, Eric,
yeah, thanks Mayor. I just want to, if a boatyard were the only thing in consideration for this lot, the lot's probably big enough to build a boatyard, a pretty nice sized boatyard. You take up the whole darn thing. Yep. Is that boatyard financially feasible? Yeah, possibly. We don't know yet. We're not there. The conundrum we're in is we've got competing uses there. That what if, here's the worst case scenario, the boatyard is the only thing that'll fit in 14 parking spaces. Are we going to pursue that as a city? Or are we going to throw the Maritime Museum under the bridge? Or under the bus? And forget it and go with our 14 parking spaces in our boatyard? That's a decision we have to make. Or can we fit them all in there? And I think to me, that's a critical first question that we get to before. Because even if it does, we draw it out and it shows that, yeah, it can all fit happily there, all three uses, then we go to financial feasibility, and financial feasibility says, it's not going to work. We abandon the boatyard and we move on and continue on. We haven't committed to doing that, to building it. So to me, it's a fairly low-cost, logical first step to get to that.
So,
and I'd also say that we do
clarify one more thing. Sorry, I understand, but I just want to clarify one more thing. When we think highest and best use, we're limited on what use we can do on this property, zoned industrial, and I think we're still beholden to some limits under the deed with Dynegy and PG&E. So it's not like we can say, let's build a resort center on there. So I think we're looking within the area of use, and that's what the discussion is tonight. Parking lot, boatyard, all of them, Maritime Museum, all those. So I think let's just continue on this direction we're going. Dave, I just had to get that in.
I think while we're doing this simultaneously, we need to do an assessment of what else could be there. I'd recommend you sort of go with the motion as the staff report laid out. That we'll use this as a sort of a fatal flaws to look at the design, what could be there. But I absolutely agree that we owe it to the council and the city to bring to you. It might be feasible, but there's something a whole lot better that could be done there that's a lot better for the city. And we spent an hour and a half driving around earlier this week with somebody that's looking for a 1 acre lot to build a manufacturing plant. Go right there. So we owe that to you as part of this to lay out what some of the other options are. But this item tonight keeps the boatyard piece moving forward, so we can look at that and look at other options as they come to bear, including, frankly, paid parking. I mean, the feasibility might be that $400,000 a year of paid parking is a great use there, and so we need to lay those things out for you. But I think taking this next step allows us to get to that point.
Let's you have a quick comment, and then we'll roll into at least stepping in some motions here to close this.
So I'll just simply say I agree. I have no problem with the $5,000. I just wanted my thoughts to be known with regard to financial feasibility and best or alternative use, and you've captured it, and I'm fine.
Thank you. Noah, did you have any comments?
I just want to. Feel like we just got a little sideways here, and everything we've talked about so far has been based on goals and past discussions, and this area clearly is a working waterfront area, and we have identified the boatyard facility as a key priority project that we need to get the answers to and move forward on if feasible. So what we've done tonight is affirm that and move forward on it. And I think if there's any deeper analysis on alternative uses, that's going to come back to us in a community forum. But I'm certainly not calling for us to spend a lot of resources looking at alternative uses for the one, what appears to be the one viable site that we control for the boatyard facility. So at this point, let's move forward with that as the priority option. And we shouldn't confuse that for staff because they've got a lot that they're working on. The financial feasibility side, I think the subcommittee is very capable of knowing how to phase that and how to bring information together, working with our staff on those different levels. And we're going to need that, but I'm open to their recommendations. And if they've heard our conversation tonight, they know we have to think bigger picture operationally. And I guarantee you they're going to be addressing that as we go along. And if you have specifics on that, you mentioned some tonight, I think we can continue to refine that as we go forward. But at this point, let's not start to confuse our direction.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion that we proceed with staff recommendation to authorize and direct the harbor director to engage an architectural or other qualified design firm to develop scaled concept drawings as the city's newly acquired Triangle parking lot property and surrounds with respect to determining how parking, maritime museum, and boatyard might all fit in the lot as outlined in the discussion section of the staff report, which includes the most needed and logical step. Next step is authorization for the harbor director to engage an architect or other design professional to take the requirements of each of those competing and complementary elements and determine how they may conceptually fit into the entirety of the Triangle lot and all city property and rights of way surrounding and adjoining to it. That's the motion on the table. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second by Matt. Discussion?
I just appreciate that we're able to discuss these things and make sure that we're clear about what direction we're going. And I think it's really helpful moving forward for the community, and especially those who are here tonight, to understand the variety of issues that each one of us represents. And I just want to appreciate that and thank everybody for their honesty.
Yeah.
And we'll get to the meat of it soon enough, I'm sure.
Thank you.
And I'll make one comment too in response to what Noah said. This may be the first best use for that site. It may well be. But just because it fits and just because it's a feasible site doesn't mean the project should go forward is all I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries. Before we close this out, I just want to get clarity. We didn't discuss cost of expanding scope to this. I feel comfortable that we're going to be able to do this within our means, as discussed here on the dais. Is there any questions from staff?
I heard the whole general fund emergency reserve was available for it.
The concern I have is, I don't remember off the top of my head what Dave's authority is, dollar amount, and so I would hate for it to be $10,000 on this type of contract, and we needed a $12,000. So could you at least authorize the up to $15,000?
For the sake of clarity on that, I think it's an easy thing to do, and I think if $15,000 is adequate.
Yeah.
Then the contract doesn't have to come back to you. That's
Okay,
my point.
that sounds great.
I think the authority is $45,000.
Okay. So, just to close this, if we, the 15, 25, I'm looking, Scott, Eric, tell me, I think 15 is comfortable. Are you comfortable with that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
All right.
totally good.
So I'd make a motion that we authorize up to $15,000 for this project and consultation. I need a second on that. So Christine, second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all very much. Thanks, council and staff, for your help through this. And with that, we'll close out item C1, and we'll move on to item D1, which is discussion and direction on street repair funding options. and that would be Mr. Buckingham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. So it is June the 23rd, which means we're within about 48 hours of the longest day of the year, but we're still going home in the dark. I mean, physically in the dark, not in the dark. We're all enlightened by being here, of course. But this item could be quick, or it could take a long time. We'll never know. So the purpose of this presentation is to provide the council an update on options for improving Morro Bay streets, with an emphasis on a potential ballot measure and other financing options. Bottom line up front here, staff recommends that the council decide now not to consider any form of a street tax on the 2016 ballot, that you refer the concepts that I'm going to present briefly here to the Public Works Advisory Board and the Citizens Finance Committee for their review and refinement, and that you direct staff to bring one or more financing proposals back to you in October for decision. So to be clear, we could get way down into the financial weeds. I'm not prepared to do that. Really what I'm looking for, we have a goal, you've given us a goal that says consider a streets ballot measure or other financing option. What I'd like you to do, hopefully tonight, is say, quit thinking about a streets ballot measure so we can not worry about that, because if we needed to worry about it, we need to start working on it now. So don't think about streets ballot measure. We'll lay out a little bit of financial options here and then come back to you, having come through the PWAB and the Citizens Finance Committee with a well thought out recommendation on the financial piece. This is our agenda, standard agenda. So background, the overall condition of streets in Morro Bay is quite bad. The pavement condition index is the standard for measuring overall road condition in the U.S. actually. The California state goal is an average PCI, pavement condition index, of 70. That's sort of a C, but that's the California goal, is to have C average roads. PCI 66 is the state average right now. That's sort of a D. Morro Bay is PCI 64. That's sort of a D minus. So our roads are pretty bad. The Morro Bay has 53 miles of roadway plus 3 bridges that we are responsible to maintain. In order to bring those 53 miles of road up to PCI 70, we'd need to spend $26 million. So if, boom, we want to get them all up to PCI 70 in the next 5 years, let's say 3 years, that bill would be $26 million-ish. Then to keep them at PCI 70 at an average condition, it would take us about $1.5 million a year. So we've talked about this in our budget workshops and such, but the bill right now to maintain 53 miles of road at a PCI 70 is about $1.5 million a year. So we're currently spending about 1/3 of that, as you heard during the budget forecast, which means our streets are getting progressively worse. They will continue to get worse until we get to the point where we are able to spend $1.5 million to $2 million a year on them. To do that, we need to, as we've discussed, improve our local economy and to raise additional revenue for streets. Both of those things need to happen. Our local economy is not going to raise that level soon. So we're not going to increase our tax revenues by 25% in the next year or two. Just not going to happen. Over the next several, half a decade, 10 years, that's what we're all working toward. But in the short term, or in the next few years, we're not going to have $1.5 million to $2 million a year to spend on streets unless we want to significantly defund other things. So just referred to this, but there's goal number 2 is improve streets, and objective 2A says to research and bring to council for decision a ballot measure for a district transaction tax, bond measure, or other financing mechanism that would provide revenue to repair and rebuild all Morro Bay streets in 5 years. So just for perspective, and what we were considering at one point, at least wanted to research, an additional 0.5% sales tax in Morro Bay would generate an additional about $1 million a year, over $1 million, well, 960, I think, this year is what Measure Q generated, which would pretty much fill that gap between our current 500,000 and the 1.5 million we need. So this is not a bad idea at all. And important to note that that sales tax is funded not exclusively by Morro Bay residents. Unlike a property tax or something else, that sales tax, a lot of that sales tax money comes from people driving from the valley to put their boat in here. As we just heard, all of the out of Morro Bay activity helps to generate that sales tax. That said, staff doesn't think that November 16 is the right time for a tax increase in Morro Bay. So I sort of put that in there because we should continue to think about this, but more like in 18 or 20, not in 2016. And here's why. So while an increase in sales tax would generate most of the revenue required for streets, and a large part of that comes from our visitors, November 16 is not the best time for Morro Bay to consider a tax increase, at least in staff's estimation. The November 14 election included a number of, measures, including schools measure and Cuesta College, that have measurably affected property taxes. The recently passed water and sewer rate increases will have a measurable effect on many of our residents. The State Bill 16 is considering a gas tax and a vehicle registration tax to raise road money. And SLO County may still consider a road measure on the 2016 ballot. For those reasons and more, we don't think that 2016 is a great time for us in Morro Bay to consider a Morro Bay only streets measure. That said, many of or at least the last two, will know what happened with State Bill 16 by the time we, in another year here, we'll know what happened with the SLO County roads measure. And so we're sort of saying let some of those things play out while the impact of increased property taxes and sewer rates and water rates, while those things settle in. And then after those things have settled in and panned out, then might be a better time to consider a ballot measure to raise revenue for streets. If no tax increase, then what could we do? I should say if no district transaction tax increase, what could we do to raise funds? First, we could consider leveraging the $500,000 of Measure Q a year that we already focus on streets, essentially using that revenue stream to finance a loan now, and in order to do a lot of street work now, and then use and just have that revenue finance it. We could consider special financing districts that allow the use of incremental property assessments, but or issue revenue bonds. Both of those other two, again, we don't think is a great idea right now to look at increases in taxation based on the things that we just laid out. So leveraging Measure Q, leveraging our current revenue stream is really what we're left with if we want to do anything about this in the next year or two, unless you'd like us to revisit the tax issues. So leveraging Measure Q, first, we assess it would be a wise financial investment. It would save money over the long term by doing a lot of work now at current prices with future dollars. So the cost of construction only goes up, except in a recession. It would have been great if we'd done this 2 years ago when a lot of the contracting prices were really low, but they're going back up now. But in any case, being able to leverage future dollars and spend them now is at current year prices is a good is a wise investment. It would be feasible. It's mostly feasible because you don't need to go to the voters and ask for a tax increase to do this. You've got the authority to have us do this. It would have an immediate impact. So leveraging those Measure Q future dollars, we could execute somewhere between $3 million and $9 million of road work in the next 2 to 3 years. And it would demonstrate, we believe, commitment and progress in a way that might make a 2018 road measure more reasonable, more palatable. So really, truth in advertising here, I still believe that the community should consider a road tax measure of some sort, because as we laid out in the beginning, we're not going to fix our streets based on the revenues that we currently have unless we significantly improve the economy over the next 3 or 4 years. And so what we are considering and laying out for you is the potential of leveraging the current level Measure Q revenue, being able to do responsibly $3, $4, $5, $9 million worth of work in the next 2 years, and then all of us being able to point to that work and essentially say, look, we did this well, we did it responsibly, we're being good stewards, and let's go for a November 18 tax measure with a sunset, with a finish the job sort of tag on it, marketing line. So we consider that being good stewards of our resources now, doing a great job in the streets over the next 2 years. You may want to then consider going to the voters in 18, but not in 16, for some road or a district transaction tax or other tax measure that is streets focused. So getting to the financing piece, what could this look like? As I mentioned, believe this year it's $550,000 of Measure Q is dedicated to streets. Our financial forecasts anticipate that will increase about 3.5% a year, except in a recession year, certainly. Dedicating some or all of that revenue to a financing mechanism that could be done over a 20-year period or a 30-year period. This chart sort of shows the principal amounts that would be available if you did that. So if you look, the left column is the term of the, let's call it a loan, 20 years or 30 years. The second column payment is whether you allocate essentially 60% of the $500,000 of road money or 100% of the $500,000 of road money to this financing mechanism, $300,000 or $500,000. So if you allocated $300,000 a year for 20 years, we'd be able to float about a $3.5 million loan and do $3.5 million worth of work over the next 2 to 3 years and pay that back over 20 years. Importantly, that would leave $250,000 a year of revenue still available to do other street work. And that's, so the other example, let's take the full Monty example at the bottom. If we did a 30-year note committing $500,000 of, or really all of our Measure Q, we would be able to do a $10 million loan and get a whole lot more street work done, but we would essentially have nothing available every year to do anything else. And that's probably not the smartest way to do this, if for no other reason that whoever didn't get their streets done during that 2 to 3 years would know that they weren't going to get anything done for the next 18 to 28 years, which wouldn't be a great way to approach this, approach the public. Some people would be really happy and some not so much. Although they might be more prone to vote for a ballot, a tax in 2018. So neither plan produces the $26 million that we need to bring all the streets up to PCI 70 now. Financing, however, would allow the city to rehabilitate somewhere between 10% and 40% of our streets, depending on which option, A, B, C, or D, you selected. That 30-year financing mechanism with $500,000 of Measure Q would generate enough funds to rehabilitate about 40% the next 2 or 3 years. But as I noted, committing 100% of our streets money up front for 30 years is probably not wise. And sort of caveat, prior to doing any of this, we need to, as you've already approved or budgeted for, we need to update the pavement model to make sure that if and when we do this, I should say prior to doing any work, not prior to you making a decision whether to do this, but prior to doing the work, we need to update the pavement management plan and make sure that we are focusing these assets on the right streets at the right time so that we have a good plan. So in summary, our streets are in bad shape. They're getting worse. If they were all at PCI 70 right now, then the $500,000 streets portion of Measure Q is enough to provides only 1/3 of the requirement to maintain our streets. Without increasing the amount of money that we spend on our streets, they're only going to get worse over time. Based on the measurable tax increases to our residents, tax and rate increases to our residents in the last year and this year, we don't recommend a November 16 streets-focused tax measure. Improving our streets is one of our city's top goals, and we can take some action now without raising taxes to improve streets more quickly while also being better stewards of the taxpayers' money, I believe. Dedicating some or all of Measure Q to a financing mechanism over 20 or 30 years would produce somewhere between $3.5 million to $10 million worth of capital now that could be spent in the next 2 to 3 years on streets. This would also allow us to better assess the impact of the state's road bill, the possible 2016 county roads or county streets ballot measure, which would allow a future council to consider a 2018 Morro Bay ballot measure. And based on that, staff recommends that the council, I'm actually going to go back to the first one that had a motion on there. Staff recommends that the council decide now not to consider any form of a streets tax on the 2016 ballot measure, sort of so your staff can cross that off our list and not think about doing market analysis and those things that we would want to do if we were thinking of that. To refer these broad concepts down to the PWAB and to the Finance Committee to get their review and their refinement, and then to come back to you in October with a recommendation for one or two of these options or none. And with that, that concludes the presentation, and there's a motion there should you consider using that. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Dave. Appreciate that. Any questions for staff at this time from council to my right? I'm seeing none. To my left, any questions? None? With that, we'll open up for public comment. Anybody like to speak to this item? Public comment is open. Seeing none, I'll close public comment and bring it back to council. Thanks for bringing this forward. Something really we need to wrestle with and evaluate where we want to go. So this is a great presentation on what our options are. So I'm supportive of staff recommendation, and I would open up for further discussion from council, and look to my right. Any comments on that?
Very much appreciate the work done and the alternatives that you've given us. I think they are excellent. I fully agree that going out in 2016 with any measure is not a good idea, and so I support the recommendation.
Noah?
Yeah, thank you. I think I support the recommendation as well. Looking at the sales tax increase idea, ultimately I think that's going to be necessary, and I was prepared to go there. I have spent a fair amount of time talking to pretty much everyone I can that brings up the need for streets work, and informally surveying them on their ideas and willingness to support a sales tax increase. And I didn't talk to a single person that was not in favor of the idea with specific language to street work and oversight, something like Measure Q. Now, when we look at the big context as laid out in the staff report, there's a lot there, and many new competing needs, and knowing just the sales tax levels around the county with almost every city at 8% now, it's definitely going out further than we may want to consider at this point to bump it up to be the highest in the county again. So I'm cautious with that, and I think that's much preferred than a property tax increase, because I like how it spreads it out to tourists as well. So I'm willing to take that off the table. I do have a concern, though, that if we put this amount of effort into street work, that we are setting it up to be the people that are satisfied with their street may be less inclined in the future. Although I think most people in Morro Bay recognize the overall levels of quality of the streets and would likely know that we still have a lot of work to do. And I think a sales tax increase would be strong in the future, even with doing some good work now. So this is a really big decision, and I'm glad staff was ahead of us on anticipating the need to work this through our Citizens Finance Committee and Public Works Advisory Board. It's a major decision for us. I'm definitely not willing to start to even speculate on which one of these different options could be the best fit. And I also am glad that we've decided not to spend money this year, to bank our funds this year towards street work into the future, and take some time to make sure we have a really smart plan about how to implement these funds going forward. Do some good planning. This year is talking with Mr. Livick about those next steps. So those are my comments.
Thanks, Noah. Matt?
Sure, I agree, and thanks for doing all this work, Dave and staff. Also, I'd like to point out that in the last 4 or 5 years with the pavement management plan and the PMI index that we've done, that came to PWEB when I was on PWEB, and we kind of spread around the work we were doing through the city, and that really spread around the goodness of road work, and that really showed people around the city that it wasn't just preferential treatment for one part of town. So I agree with you, Noah, in terms of that and looking ahead. So I think taking this back to PWEB and Citizen Finance in the fall and moving ahead with that, I'm totally with that also.
Great. Christine?
I would agree with what everyone has said. So I would just say strongly that I think it takes a big campaign to increase the sales tax. And I think Grover Beach tried it twice, and the first time failed and went back again. Am I correct about that? I think they were very close.
Yep.
Lost it, and then this time did achieve it. But I think at this point, I would not be willing to go out for a sales tax increase and campaign for that as a way to solve our street challenges. I think this is a much smarter way to handle it. And I think that our community, honestly, I don't think they could bear any more increases at this very time today, given what we've gone through recently with just our water and sewer. So I think to be respectful of that, knowing at the same time, to echo Noah, that certainly if there's one thing people are willing to raise sales tax for, it would be a streets measure. But then that they always say, and I don't know if you hear it, but just for streets. So we would have to go then for the higher percentage, which would mean more campaigning and a more difficult percentage to get than what we got for Measure Q. So we have to keep that in mind. Measure Q was a 50% plus one tax. This would be
that was a general
sales tax. This would be a specific tax, could be. Okay, I would just say that people understand the difference, in my estimation, and I understand that I know where we are with Measure Q, and I just think that people are willing to go that way with the sales tax increase if it is for streets, a la Grover Beach style. So my feedback on that, and I appreciate the options, and I'm looking forward to our citizen input on our panels. Thanks.
Thanks for your comments. And I think, so basically, before we make the motion, it seems like we have consensus, and perhaps even in 2018, if it really, that's a time to reconsider sales tax initiative, then, if everyone on council here is supportive of that, then we can add our 2 cents regardless of where we sit on the dais or out in the audience and help support that. So that would be my 2 cents there. With that, we can take, unless there's any other discussion, we could take a motion as stated.
I'd only, just based on the comment from Christine, that I believe that a new measure could be crafted even more narrowly than Measure Q, that says this is streets only, not public safety, et cetera, and put an oversight kind of thing on it. And I believe Atascadero did something where they had 2 matching measures. One approved the the sales tax, and the other said, and that thing can only be used for streets, but they only had to get 50% for each. So there's a way to craft this that doesn't require the.
They did an advisory vote.
Yeah, what he said.
To give direction on how the money should be spent in Atascadero. So they did a general purpose tax with an advisory vote. So it didn't change it could still be used for anything, but the community gave recommendations as to how it would be used. Grover actually didn't do a sales tax. They did revenue bonds paid by property tax increase. So. And I think there are $40 million for their revenue bonds over 20 years, typical life of a street.
Great. So I just didn't want anybody watching or us thinking that we would have to necessarily meet the 2/3 standard.
Great. With that, we would take a staff recommendation as stated, unless anybody wants to read the motion specifically. Is there any motion? We have so moved. So we have a motion as stated, and by Noah, and a second by Mr. Henning. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0. Great. That concludes item D1. We've already completed item D2, and we move on to council declaration of future agenda items. Yours?
We heard testimony tonight during the open session about supporting the ban of expanded polystyrene foam, and I would certainly support that being agendized for future discussion in terms of a city ordinance consideration.
I'd support that.
Yes, I support that.
Anybody else?
Yep.
That, so we have unanimous support for that. Anything else?
Yes. Did you have? Okay. Wanted to bring up. We did get correspondence regarding the HERO program, which is focused on water efficiency funding access, and a request to discuss that. It's basically a resolution of support and relative to our goals and so forth with water conservation. I think it'd be something worthwhile exploring further.
Any further discussion?
I was a teeny bit distracted. I'm sorry. Could you say that again quickly? I'm sorry.
The correspondence we received about the HERO program,
yes,
related to financing for water conservation projects for private, public use.
So has it been a PWAB? Do you know?
No, it has not.
Could it go there?
I think we need to have a conversation at the council level, but could start a PWAB either way. But ultimately, we need to define whether we're even willing to go forward with it. If it comes with a PWAB recommendation, that's okay with me either way.
I'd be supportive of future agenda item through the PWAB board, actually. If there's support from resto council, we'll go ahead and do that.
We'll be looking at it for a special PWAB meeting in July to continue the discussion on the water meter issue. So we could add, as long as we're meeting, we might as well give them things to work on. So
works for me.
That'd be great if they took a first look.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So that would go.
But Rob didn't just commit to doing that in July, unless you were telling them to do it in 20 days.
No,
in other words, I'm very comfortable
in
in this process with you putting things on the agenda and then the staff making recommendations to the mayor on whether it goes through a planning commission or something or comes straight to you. In other words, I don't feel it's necessary. If you'd like to, I'm not against it at all. But just know that anytime you bring something up, we're going to look and say, boy, which committee or group should look at this? I'm just don't want us to be handcuffed necessarily into putting this now on the top of our workload for the next 20 days.
And I appreciate that conversation. I'm one to be proactive in that conversation as well, that the priorities, that doesn't trump any priority by any means, and that, how it lays out to an advisory board would be through the priorities and goals that we've already established.
Yeah. If it's easy, we'll get it there.
Yeah.
But I just don't want to be handcuffed to then I have to take something else off of Rob's list in order to get that to the PWEB.
Great.
I want to have the discussion at some point. That's all I'm doing.
Yeah, future agenda item.
Well, I would just say this. Is it just easier for staff workload to have it come right to council?
Well, let's let them figure that out.
Okay, then, fine. Like, I doubt it. I doubt it makes it easier here, but.
Okay. Future agenda items?
Yeah, I don't know where you want to discuss it, but Dave, there was a mentioning of the hiring policy. Just, and I don't know if that, you want to agendize that here or how you want to. Was brought up in the open testimony.
If you can certainly your prerogative to agendize it now, and then the mayor will sort out when it comes back to you. Alternatively, I'd like to huddle with my HR folks and look around and then be able to provide you some input on whether you think that needs to be an agenda item or not.
And I appreciate that. I would support that, and it would allow each one of council, if we need further discussion on that, and feel compelled to next council meeting saying, you know what, I want to agendize this based on the conversations I've had. I think that would be a good approach.
I've got it on my to-do list.
Thanks. Any other future agenda items?
Jamie, I have one. I'd like to put on a future agenda item the situation that the Sherrod family brought with their conditional use permit situation, and have that put on a future agenda item.
And I guess what I would ask, because I haven't reached out to Mike as well, but I guess I would ask for the same thing, in that perhaps council to have personal contact and have the conversation with Mike and Scott on whether or not it warrants doing a future agenda item. If we don't feel it's warranted, then I'm just sensitive to our staff workload on future agenda items. So, I'd certainly reach out to Mike. I know he's emailed me. I haven't got together with him, but I'd certainly reach out to Mike, talk with him about it, talk with Scott, and if I felt compelled that it needed to be agendized next council meeting, I would be supportive of that. But I guess I don't want to necessarily raise this to an agenda item without feeling that I have, a supportive view on it. So that's kind of my take on it.
Okay, so if they could then, because they brought the situation, and it is kind of a unique situation, as Scott could probably attest to. So,
if there's support from the rest of council, it's great. But from my perspective, I'm just sensitive on, all the agenda items. And I was just thinking, hey, if we can address this and then come back and say, you know what, based on the conversations, and like I said, Mike, I know we've had emails. I haven't really sat down and talked to them, but based on this conversation, if I felt supportive, certainly I would support agendizing the item to have that discussion on his request.
And in order to take action on this situation, we need to agendize it, correct?
I was going to say, if you'd like, staff would be happy to put together a short sort of position paper on what we've done, where staff is on this, provide that to the council. We've talked to Mike already. We'll provide that to Mike also. You can each look at that. You can talk to the Sherrods, and then next meeting, based on what you read and on your discussion, if you want to put it on the agenda, then you can do that.
Okay, no, that sounds good. And then if everybody who has not, because I do believe the Sherrod family has reached out to council, if everybody would, then if we could have that from you, and then reply or look at the situation, and then we can talk about it at the next meeting.
Yeah, Christine.
This is an issue that I think has been brought forward to us before. The most recent email wasn't the first time I had heard about this from the family. And I would just like a clarification. I think what the request is it would be a variance fee refund. Was that my understanding? And that would be something that, is that correct? Is that what exactly would it be?
They asked, because of the process they went through, they requested a refund of the fees that they paid for their application. Because they went through the process and their project was approved, I denied the request. They took the request forward to the city manager, and now they're taking it forward and making that request to the council because we've denied it at the staff level.
Right, so at some point it will come to the council if we agendize it.
If you agendize it, otherwise the decision's been made.
I understand completely. Yeah, I'm prepared to discuss it at the council level. I mean, it's an unusual situation. I have spoken to the Sherrods several occasions over the past several months. I have read also correspondence that the council or that the staff, both city manager and the community development manager, have sent to the Sherrods. So I feel like I'm more than willing to have the discussion. I think if you're going to put together a memo, wouldn't expect more for a staff report, quite honestly. So if you're putting that together for me, I'd rather have that conversation in public and sort of get closure to that family. I think it's that unique. I don't think it's precedent setting in that way. I've thought about that, but I think it's a unique situation, and I would be comfortable bringing it forward with the amount of staff. If what I've just heard was a suggestion that we circulate a memo to council, I'd just make it a brief staff report, and when it's appropriate, bring it forward. I mean, we're going into council break, so I don't know what the schedule would be for that, because then I know we'll be backed up the next 2 meetings for sure. So I'll let that to staff discretion, but I would like to discuss it. I'm comfortable bringing it to council for discussion. So I would support one, and I don't know if Matt, if you're still asking for that future agenda item support.
No, I'm fine. If we get this staff report, everybody can be apprised of the situation, reach out to the Sherrod family, and then at that future, we can either decide to put it on a future agenda item or not.
I guess I'm already supporting it as a future agenda item. So,
as do I, but
yeah.
I mean,
well, I'm one, and we haven't heard from John or Noah. So
where we're at over here.
Well, I guess I wonder why we would want to prioritize that and put that on the agenda as opposed to the HR policy and or anything else that might be brought up by somebody that automatically asks for it to be agendized at the public level before staff has the opportunity to give us input and information.
We just did that, though, with the styrofoam ban. I mean, we don't. I have more information on the Sherrod based on my emails back and forth with the Sherrod family and meeting with them and then talking to staff about it. I have actually more information about their development project than I do about polystyrene. Yeah. That's just why. And I feel like for me, it's been something that I've known about as a council member for a fairly long time. So I'd like us to bring closure to it, but that's just me, and I would need support from 3 to even consider the refund.
Well, I will defer to your respectful judgment, and I would concur and have a problem if it were agendized. So,
I'd also support having the conversation. I didn't hear Christine say the word priority, so I'm expecting staff and the mayor to work that in as we are able, knowing that we have a big workload and that we'll get to it in a fair and reasonable time frame. But I did not hear the word priority to make sure, for example, that it's on the next council agenda or so forth.
To clarify, I meant how would we prioritize somebody that came up and asked every time that something be put on the agenda from public input? That was what I meant.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I made the comments I did. I think at some point we should be very cautious about continuing just to agendize that and figure out whether or not this may not be an item that we want to load onto our agenda and just say no, not one we want to do. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying. And Mike, sent these and the correspondence. I've not, closed the loop and full conversation with him on that. So that's where I'm at. Right.
I appreciate your support. I don't know if I got the mayor's support or not. I'm not sure, but I guess I have 3, so I'm okay. But I would just say that I rarely do. I really rarely put on agenda items. Yeah. I'm very cautious of it, and I think if you see and you take a look at any agenda planning guide, I really don't overload. Mm-hmm. I feel like this is, though, an opportunity for us to give closure to a project, and I would like us to hear it. I'm not saying one way or another. I just think we should need to hear it because it has no other place to go now.
And at this point, we've got it.
Yeah.
You're asking
okay.
me.
Yeah, I know, but we just keep talking about whether or not. And I just want to say that I am very aware that people come and ask us for stuff all of the time. Right. So I'm aware of that, and I appreciate your reminder.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks. So we've got consensus on putting that on the agenda. Okay. Thanks. Anything else? for future agenda items? All right. Well, great. So we're going to adjourn to the next regular council meeting, and that'll be held on, hold on a second. So our next council meeting will be held July 14, 2015, 6 p.m. at the Vetch Hall right here, 209 Surf Street. And so the meeting will be adjourned. All right, thanks. Thank you.